right, welcome to episode number 198 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording on March the 12th, 2023. My name's Eric, host of the show based in Southern Ontario, hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, and computer geek. As a first responder, witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events, started a small preparedness company to help people get better prepared for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
And I'm Jeff. I am based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, ham radio operator, general overall handyman, and weather nerd.
And I'm Brad. I'm in Eastern Ontario, part-time amateur prepper, constantly trying to better myself.
My name's Pierre. I'm a part-time wannabe prepper, tactical beard owner, base t-shirt version, government critique, and the reason we mostly hit the explicit button.
Can't argue with that.
Nope.
You should have been on the first part of this chat.
The pre-show was spicy.
Oh, yeah.
Agreed.
All right, we've got Frugal Gunny with us tonight. If you want to do a quick intro, by all means, you can.
Thank you. So I go by Frugal Gunny on YouTube, and that's because I actually have a professional career in IT, and I'm using this brand to promote my content out there. So I'm a member of a couple of different mutual assistance groups, and I've been living in my off-grid cabin for most of the last year, and it's up in Northern Ontario, not too far from Kirkland Lake. I never really considered myself or called myself a prepper until a few other people started calling me that a few years back. I myself have been kind of doing the gradual process of going off grid since about 2010. I started heavy Army cadet training as a young lad. I ended up leading my Skillet Arms team to third place finish in central area competitions. And that was a lot of fun. I had a ton of fun. I learned a whole lot of different skills. Marksmanship, map and compass, navigation, various different survival methods, survival thinking, field craft of all kinds, building survival shelters, things like that, first aid, and what we used to call GMT, General Military Training. And I got the chance to teach that and reinforce that with this team of cadets, and we did really well. And then as soon as I figured out that I could get paid to do this stuff, I joined the reserves, and I was a sapper for a while, a combat engineer. And there I went through Arctic indoctrination, and that was probably the biggest eye-opener, was Arctic Indoc in terms of how to survive in the bush. I learned a few other survival techniques and habits that I still use to this day, all the time, whenever I'm up at the cabin, out on any land, when I'm hunting, fishing, camping, outdoors in general. What else have I done? Oh, geez, I took a trapping course so I could do more outdoors to survive lawfully, legally. I'm working on my ham radio license. I've got the books. It's just a lot of heavy reading.
Sure is.
Oh, yeah. I worked at Cabela's for a little while.
I am.
No, I started reading. I'm probably into chapter 3 of the.
Yeah, you're further ahead than I am.
The first book? Okay. So I started that, but the last couple of years, it's all been just me catching up to circumstances, trying to stay ready and afloat, Pierre met me when I was working at the local Cabela's gun counter there, and
Yep.
I was starting to have a bit more of a public face. And I got involved into all kinds of marksmanship programs, lots of fun. I started doing different kinds of shooting I hadn't done when I was a young lad, so I was doing that. And gosh, along the way, I got diagnosed with the weirdest thing. They told me I was environmentally hypersensitive. And so I started realizing that they didn't know what that meant, and they weren't really willing to test it and figure out how to fix it. And the best advice I got was from a doctor who said, well, you just need to get away from this stuff, and you'll find that you'll feel better. So it's kind of the same advice they give to allergy folks, just get away from it if you can, and then you don't have to take all this weird medicine and stuff that doesn't really fix you. So I started spending more time outdoors, away from the grid, literally. No power on the weekends because I was working in IT, right? So I was always connected. And what I found is that I slept better, I felt better. And so I was spending more time outdoors. I ended up meeting the neatest fellow on an Indian reserve in Pikwakanagan. It's the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan. I was in there one day asking about where I could park a trailer because I was looking for a quiet place to park a trailer. The place where my trailer was a bit of a party town, and I wasn't out in the woods and the wilderness to party. I was out in the woods and the wilderness to get away from that stuff.
You must have been in Calabogie.
Not terribly far. I was in Eganville, Golden Lake, Eganville.
Yes,
Close enough.
All the time.
Yeah. So we had a lot of the fellas from Petawawa that I got along with, frankly, because that's sort of my background. But I've been out a long time ago. I got injured, and so I've been out a long time now. But I still gravitate to that environment. So it was kind of neat talking to the lads and hearing how things are going back then. But I just couldn't take the party town. So I went to see this fellow, and he said to me, "You know what? I was thinking of parking a trailer back here." And he said, "Come and see me in a couple of weeks." So I came back to see him in a couple of weeks, and he said, "Yeah, there's a spot down here. Come and take a look." He'd actually finished graveling it down, and he was spraying it down, and he said, "Go and put your trailer down here." And he wasn't charging me much at all. And we kind of struck up a friendship. And it turns out that he had been a local guide and a trapper and teaching young lads how to do this most of his life. I mean, he was an outdoorsman. And so I'd never really had any formal hunting or fishing training. I wanted to learn to be more self-sufficient. And I asked him, I kept bugging him, and one day he said, "Why do you want to learn to kill?" And it was a hard question, man. It was like, and he says, "Yeah, why do you want to learn to do this stuff? Because you want to kill." And I was trying to explain to him that it's not because I want to kill, it's because I want to be able to live off the land out there if I'm out on my own, and it's just me. And he still was pressing on. He's like, "Well, why do you want to learn to kill?" And I was like, "Well, I already know how to kill, two-legged predators, and it's not really what I'm going to be doing anymore, or maybe I don't even aspire to it anymore. But I'd sure like to use those skills and learn to live more on the outdoors." And so he took me under his wing and started teaching me how to live off the bush, how to hunt, how to fish, how to see. He used to say it, how to see. Because he used to tell me a lot of people come out to the bush and they look around, but they don't know how to see.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah, so I started being able to look at the bush, and you start to see how the animals browse. And the browse pattern reveals everything. And just yesterday, when I was on my way back to town, I'm at my girlfriend's right now, that skill set came back. I was driving along, and I could see the cedars. And if you look at the cedar bush while you're driving along, you might spot somewhere there is no branches up to about, a height of 5-6 feet. There's no branches. You can walk straight clear under that cedar. And if you look closely at cedars in nature, they don't work like that. A cedar will be full quite low to the ground. So what's the deal? That's the deer browsing. The deer browse there in the wintertime when they're out of corn or whatever else they're browsing on. They'll still go after those cedar buds. So I was on my way back Saturday, cutting through the province of Quebec. And I was just spotting these cedars. Oh, yeah. Well, let me just say this one thing about Quebec. I've met some great people in Quebec, but you don't need any speed limits in your province. Okay, the roads are the speed limit. I don't know how you must budget 15% of the value of the vehicle every year on repairs alone to live in Quebec, man, because that keeps my speed down alone.
Well, with that, I will say welcome to the show. We are looking forward to hearing everything you've got to say tonight, and happy to have you aboard.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, if you want to help support the show and keep the Canadian Prepper podcast on the air, potentially not on YouTube after tonight, we'll see, you can buy some swag. We've got both the Canadian Prepper podcast t-shirt and the tactical Velcro patch available at prepperpodcast.ca. All the proceeds help keep the lights on and the backup generator fueled.
And if you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and like us on Facebook and submit a review on iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad, or just a topic you want us to cover. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
You do that so much better than Pierre.
Yeah, because he didn't fuck it up.
And we're hitting the explicit button 10 minutes in.
I already told you that.
Yeah.
I
So
said
we've
that
got
in my
some-
intro.
You did. We've got some out of touch content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some recent news articles as usual. We'll update you on our personal preps since the last episode. We're going to get into the main topic of off-grid living. So let's move into the news, shall we?
The world still spins for now.
It does still spin. It is still round. This is correct.
Unless you're a flat earther, and then hey,
World's still
Whatever.
round.
Just
Yeah.
take a walk off the edge.
so I've
Pretty
got
sure
a
the
couple,
social-
We're so off of
social
YouTube.
The social distance when the COVID's happened should have, determined that a bunch of people fell off and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
But that's for a different topic.
Oh boy. Monday nights.
I've got a couple of quick little news ones here. Of course, being the weather guy that I am, so California is bracing for yet another atmospheric river. I'll touch into that on my weather blurb, but they just can't seem to catch a break out there. I mean, it's good. They desperately needed it, but it's getting to the point now where it's too much. But yeah, I'll touch into it on the on my blurb. And the other thing, it's just quickly bringing it up. I'm not going to really talk about it because I don't really know much about it, and it's not any of my forte or anything. But I'm sure people have heard that Silicon Valley Bank in the U.S. collapsed on Friday. And yeah, apparently lots and lots of people could potentially lose millions and millions of dollars in money. Last I heard, it looks like there's going to be some sort of a bailout. I don't know how it's going to work or whatever. I'll have to follow it. But the only reason I kind of put it in there is the old adage of don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify, obviously have cash on hand. Don't leave everything in a bank, and keep it in 2 or 3 different banks if you can, or bank accounts if you need to put something away, so that if one of them happens to go tits up, you're not losing everything.
No, that's a good point. It's never good to see that a bank has collapsed. Yeah, it's not a good
That's
sign.
definitely got to suck.
Yeah, there's going to be a ripple effect for sure.
So I surprisingly have a news article, and it's because the fund may start real soon in La Belle Province, which, I mean, I'm assuming probably most people that listen to this and everything may not associate with this, but depending on where you live and where you work or whatever, Montreal specifically, health authorities are reporting about a new dangerous drug circulating in the city, being mixed with illicit drugs and everything. It's this weird thing, I can't pronounce it, but it's called the zombie drug. Does a bunch of stuff. Big news article saying that naloxone isn't really helping with it. They see an uptake since 2012, I think, but now it's coming a lot more susceptible. So, if you're potentially work or interact or have to make a trajectory through those places where you live, may be more susceptible to people that do these recreational things, just maybe be extra vigilant, or potentially start looking at a route that you can avoid those. Unless you're like really hoping for the zombie apocalypse. That, I mean,
I was going to tie it in.
like just have at her, bring your katana with you, and, But just
Allegedly.
allegedly. Yeah. I mean, yeah. But
So that's the first I've actually heard of that, Pierre. Is it? Are we talking like kind of like a fentanyl 2.0 sort of thing, or?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this news article is kind of weird on how it says. Like they've
Oh.
noticed it in illicit drugs. It's like this weird, like zilazan, zilazan. I don't know. Something that's been mixed in with a whole bunch of illicit drugs that people will buy on the streets that are not legally. able to
Xylazine.
The xylazine thing.
Yeah. Okay. So they've
Well, just stop
reported. I
doing
think
the
it was
drugs.
RCMP. This that they've noticed this. Being added to certain things since like 2012. 2012. But
Yep.
it's starting to take a little bit more of an uptake, and apparently it does weird things to people where even naloxone doesn't bring them back completely, and this that. So I don't know. Just if you're in those shady areas, maybe be extra vigilant or try and avoid them a little bit more, even if it's a 5-minute detour. This may carry on. This may, stop real soon. But just something to keep an eye
hey,
on, because
I gotta go
you
there
can never
tomorrow.
avoid it.
I gotta go
Don't
there
lick the door
tomorrow.
handles.
Oh, I don't. Wear gloves. But I gotta go there tomorrow, and then probably on Wednesday, and then probably on Friday. And
Yeah,
then
but you're probably
repeat-
going to a spot where like people work.
Well, that's true, right?
Yeah, so you probably, and probably not politicians, so you'll be all right.
Oh, definitely, they won't come down there.
Oh boy. All right, let's move into what we've done lately for preps before we turn into Monday night CPP, shall we?
Sorry.
Well, it's been a little while since I've been on here. Then fuel rotation, clean up in my basement store stockroom, reorganized my bedroom, Costco run last weekend. I cleaned my Berkey filters. Thank you for those, Eric. Work, some more work. And I have officially not had a cigarette now in 8 days.
Nice. Congrats.
Nice.
Congratulations. Well done.
It's not easy.
No,
No.
hardest thing in the world to quit, harder than cocaine, harder than alcohol, is stopping cigarettes. And I've made it 8 days. I still have half a pack of smokes in my lunchbox, and there's still other ones floating around here. And just it's I think the temptation is almost all gone. So
Bravo.
keep going,
Awesome.
one day at a time.
Yep.
Right? So
Yep.
Yeah.
You do
I
it.
have
that's-
also
that's
heard
awesome.
that temptation never goes away. I knew someone that
No.
15 years, and they're like, they crack a beer in summer, and they're like, man, I could go for a smoke, sitting on a patio having a
I
beer.
have heard
Like,
that
I've
as well.
heard it doesn't go. It gets easier, but it never
9 years
officially
this
goes away.
year. 9
meant-
years this year. 9 years
Good
myself.
job. Good job, man.
And it
But
never
still-
goes away.
Somebody offers me one, I stumble, I want to grab it, and then I realize, oh no, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
You
know
can do
that'll start to wane as I go on further of not having one, and it'll become easier and easier over time. But yeah, I work by myself at work all the time, so I'm just in the truck and driving, so I don't have somebody else coming up and saying, "Hey, let's go for a smoke," or do this, whatnot. And I get home and I try to keep myself busy, and the wife will go for a smoke, and she stopped asking me, "Hey, smoke break, do this, do that."
Good.
Nope, just keep going, and hey,
Nice.
one day at a time.
Just filled the time with the ham radio studying.
I got a bunch of other projects first, but that is one that's I've moved that book from the middle of the pile to the top of the pile.
Perfect.
So
well done.
I just did some food prep and a little bit of fuel rotation this week, and that's been it for me.
Very nice. So for me, I've been focusing on doing some more close area communication upgrades. So I talk quite a bit on the podcast about HF and worldwide communications, and we've been trying to get the NVIS going for some further distance, like provincial type of communications. But I realized I'm lacking a little bit in just my close quarter communications. So been upgrading the handheld walkie-talkies, handheld ham radios, and took advantage of getting some signal stuff antennas. I don't know if you can see those, but grabbed a couple of those to put on a couple of ham radios. So I'm going to get those deployed out and kind of stored in the vehicles. So we've got them because, like I said, the last year or two, it's been all further distance, long range stuff I've been focusing on. And I completely lost sight of the nice close communication stuff. So realized, oops. And so going to be cleaning that up a little bit and tightening that up a touch. So that's what I've been doing. And beyond that, it's been stupid busy at work. So I've been running all over the place, solving problems and doing that. So it's been great.
I've got a little bit of some food prep. Tried a new breakfast plan for the week. Work it out. New machine setup, trial, error, fail, and excitement all at the same time. Got some more wedding stuff figured out, and just we're pre-planning. So for the honeymoon after the wedding, the daughter's staying back home, so we're meal planning. Sorry, for us as well as her, because she's still got school, this that. So we're kind of making a little bit extra in bulk and like throwing it in those fancy like sealable containers, throwing them in the freezer just to make that transition a little easier for all of us. And yeah, work and more work. I had to go to Toronto last week. I know it's unfortunate.
Gross.
The butthole of Ontario.
It's funny. So did I.
Yeah, man, I still smell it even though I've showered.
I feel for you. I
Yep.
feel for you.
But yeah, so just trying to wrap up everything at work because I'm going off for a week and a bit. I hate leaving stuff undone and this that. So trying to catch up on that and everything with work, and that's what it for now at least.
Awesome. Cool. Well, with that, say we move into the main topic. So, like we said in the intros there, we've got Frugal Gunny with us tonight. He's going to talk about his experiences living off-grid in a cabin. We've been quite excited about this for a while. As soon as Pierre said that you were game to come on the show and talk to us, everybody's been pumped to have you come on. So it's been we've been waiting in angst for you to show up and get on a show that we can talk to you on a Sunday night. So, like I said, we appreciate you coming out for the night, and I think I'll just open the floor up to questions from the panel. Anybody in the live chat that wants to throw a question in, or just let you tell us about your story and how we ended up in a cabin on your own and off grid.
Well, if you don't have any questions right off the bat, I can start by giving you the 30-second elevator speech. Mm-hmm. Basically, I had moved to an area outside of Ottawa, Smiths Falls. And I was looking for land, and this was just before this whole pandemic thing hit. And I was living already in a tiny little spot, tiny little place, and the land deal fell through. And we're talking about a small space, a 16 by 12 shed that was being converted to 4 seasons, and had been converted to 4 seasons. And I was living in that, and it was quite a transition, but I was learning to figure it out. And to quote a friend, you basically have to live and think like you're living in a submarine. Everything small, everything dual purpose. You can't have one single thing that takes a lot of space. If you can combine everything you need into all the functionality you can into a smaller thing that does multiple jobs at once, perfect. Keep it inside. Or else you have storage outside. So that was a neat challenge that prepared me for this deal. But the land deal fell through, so I started looking around, and a very good friend pointed me in the direction of this fellow who had been involved with some of these so-called medieval camps up near the Kirkland Lake area, and he was rather disenchanted with how things were going, and so he said, "That's it, sayonara, I split." And he bought his own land, and he started his own community. Now, this was all before the big lockdowns began, and so I bought into this because it was just a gut feeling thing. It was my gut feeling that was driving me, telling me, you need to get closer to the land. You need a roof to call your own of some kind. And I couldn't put my finger on it, and next thing you know, we had companies and organizations everywhere bringing in mandates of all kinds, and I started getting concerned, and so all of a sudden, this friend of mine who was also bought into the community, he sold me his cabin. He'd kind of had enough of the harsh weather. He had originally been from the UK, and I think he'd given a real good go of it, but his circumstances changed for him. He decided he was going to give it a go elsewhere. But he now had this cabin that he had built up that he was trying to offload to me, and he looked to me and he said, "Would you like to buy it?" And the price was so fair that I couldn't say no. I jumped on it. And so the next thing you know, though, so I now had the cabin back in September of last year, but no chimney installed. no solar installed, just a cabin. So I proceeded to really rush very quickly to install my wood stove and chimney before the winter time, and I was able to do that. And then over the course of the winter time, I start to go up there to install my solar panels and set up my array, and basically survive the rest of the year. And I was asked to return to work just recently, so basically I lived up there on all of my food preps. I moved all of my food preps that I had up there. I probably had a good solid year's worth of dry goods. I had salt, I had sugar, all the basics you need, water filters. Definitely had ammo and supplies to build traps with if I was in a really bad jam.
Also, a word of advice: don't let Jeff know exactly where you live in case something happens. You may try and get them from you.
Jeff, I believe
only if Eric doesn't have stuff.
So Jeff,
I have nothing.
Thanks for ruining it, Pierre. I was making notes,
I'll share with you.
He's too good of a friend to do that. Too good of a friend.
Well, Jeff, I'll share this with you. This is what I advised my other groups that I'm a member of and friends with to do. In what I feel coming, and we're just talking about feels here. It's my gut feeling, and for the record, I've always been wrong when I ignored my gut feeling. Okay, so if there's only one thing I will give to anybody watching this or listening to this, the one skill that will serve you well under any emergency, especially the personal emergency I lived in the last year, is your gut feeling. When everything was telling me do this, do that, outside of myself, even amongst my peers and amongst my family, inside I had to listen to myself, and I followed that gut feeling. So thankfully, because I'd been following that gut feeling for a long time, and that gut feeling had been telling me, have a year's worth of food on hand. Have more cans than you think you need on hand, to the point that you have to start rotating through them so that you're eating the old stuff. Buy 2 or 3 of technology, because technology fails when you most need it, right? Things like that came exactly to fruition for me in the last year. And so there were times when, everything went wrong, but because I had backups, because I had at least thought of failure of your plan A and plan B, I wasn't completely taken with my pants down, and I was at least able to cope.
So you didn't pay taxes.
Unfortunately, I've paid way too much tax in my life, I think, Pierre.
I was going to say, this is a live recorded show on the internet. Don't expect me to answer that question at all.
What I would say is that when you're out in the bush and alone, and you have a hard time getting delivery of goods, because I don't have general delivery where my cabin is. In fact, my cabin is about 800 meters from any drivable road with a regular car. So you can off-road it for a portion of it, but we're sort of landlocked, and it's a little rough getting in. It's a lot easier if you've got an ATV. But on foot, there's some muddy areas. The road needs to be reconditioned and rebuilt. It's a property that's been basically left fallow for a good 20 to 30 years at least, judging by the growth that I see there. So the roads show it too. The closest neighbors I have are about 1 kilometer away.
It's too close.
And it's it can get cold up there. I recorded a minus 35 there last year. It was much milder this year, much milder. You get a ton of snow. So that's a real factor for folks who want to live off the grid in a northern band. I mean, even just here in the Ottawa area where I've lived a good portion of my life, I'm not from here, so I've got other comparison points like PEI, Nova Scotia. I'm from down east, so that's what I can compare to. And the storms there were just horrifically, dumpy. You'd receive, feet of snow at a time. But up north, what happens is the extremity of the weather is a little tougher. The water table there is quite high, so access to water, not a problem. But potable water, it's not the nicest water to drink. You'd have to really filter it quite a bit. there is thankfully a nice spring about half an hour, or no, about 20 minutes away on the way to Kirkland Lake. It's on the way to town. So if I go in that direction, I just bring a few jugs and I have some absolutely pristine drinking water. And all I have to do is stop by the roadside, bring my jugs out, and this thing runs 24/7, 365 a year, even at minus 35.
Now, has anybody tapped that?
Well, I think at some point somebody did. They just
Yeah.
kind of put a pipe on it and they put a cap on it and they just let it run out into the ditch because it's kind of on the public road side.
Okay.
And it's not quite on the private property side. So anybody basically has access to it. It's a little bit like if you are in the Quebec area, just north of Ottawa, there's Montée de la Source, Highway 36, 307, Highway 307. Along this, it's called Montée de la Source. Source is spring in French. On the roadside, right near a sand quarry, there is a spring tube coming right out of the ground, and people pull over there with their jugs. Same idea, except the water quality is so amazing up there. I almost refuse to drink any other water now because I got that.
I did that when I bought a Berkey. I was like, what's
Oh.
this peasant water? I'm good. I have Berkey water. Like, oh, it's hot out. I got to bring like 9 liters of water with me because I don't want to drink tap water anyway. Yeah,
Well,
I get that.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Not when where I grew up, probably about a couple kilometers away, was sort of the same thing. It was just a spring that ran, like you say, 24/7, 365, and it became quite popular, and a lot of people were using it, and like you say, filling their jugs and doing all that. And of course, that just made the city not want that to happen. So of course, they had to show up and put all these kinds of signs up saying how use it at your own risk, and the water may not be good for you, and blah 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 blah. More BS, more BS. But yeah, it was as you said, it was the crispest, cleanest. You don't think water has a taste, but when you've had that, and then you get something out of your tap, it's totally different.
I have to agree 100%. And, then to your point, Jeff, one of the things I noticed and one of the reasons that attracted me to this area where I bought the cabin and I bought my share of my lifetime lease, if you will, is that it's in an unorganized township. So what that means
sign
is
me
that...
up.
We all know what
exactly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think you people, I see you all nodding, so I think you know exactly what that means. For those of you out there who don't and who are listening in or watching from the beyond, an unorganized township, at least in a common law jurisdiction like here in Ontario, means that there is no municipal corporation in charge of things up there. There is a skeleton municipality. It basically takes care of the roads, and that's about it. Otherwise, the roads aren't even patrolled by the OPP because they don't have a municipal agreement to patrol there because there is no formal municipality.
So what you're saying is there's absolutely no way anywhere in Quebec has a municipal or unorganized township with how their roads are.
Oh man, I highly doubt it. I would imagine the only way you get anything close, bud, is if you're on a private landowner's plot,
Yeah.
like they do have in Northern Ontario, and it's owned by a mine or a resource extraction company.
Yeah.
And then they lease, a certain amount of acreage to you, and they kind of give you carte blanche, and away you go. So that's the beauty of where I'm at. I'm able to, for example, build a 12 by 12 shed with a 9-foot ceiling, and guess who is there to tell me I can't?
Nobody.
Exactly, absolutely no one.
Now, question: do you still need a permit for a septic?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And that's probably the excellent question of the day, because out there in Ontario, even if you own your land 100%, you do not own rights to pollute the waters that are nearby, nor the water table. And the MNR will claim jurisdiction over you and your septic. In fact, I heard, and there are people up there who will just do as they need to and put in a septic. And some of the people who have witnessed those folks doing that have reported them, and of course they get their fingers smacked by MNR and all this and that, and told they have to pull it out, and it's a real nightmare. So
and I mean, you don't
obviously-
want
Shitty
to
situation.
you don't want to be
Yeah.
fishing, eating the fish that you decided to put septic bed the wrong
Yeah.
way, that like
Yeah.
that fish is
Yeah.
grown
The
a
eyes.
little bit due to certain things you have
Mhm.
digested in a weird way, and they absorb it in the wrong way.
So let's
So,
just
like,
put
I'm-
it this way: you don't want to eat shit fish.
No.
Yeah.
Or the one with the third eye.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
You're already hitting the explicit button. So
Just saying.
I tried on this one.
Good try.
I have the greenest way to deal with it is it becomes fuel.
Don't eat fish.
And well, no, the solid waste. I love fish.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, it's been too long since I had a feed of fresh fish. So, any of you who are ice fishing in the area, I know it's getting a little hairy to be out on the water, but man, I'd love to still get some
It's
fish.
still
in,
a
but
risk I'm willing to take for them. to
I've
go
seen the
fish.
lakes and the rivers on the way down, man. They're already thinning out, so I don't know.
Yeah. No, thank you. Stand on ice
So,
all day. Yes.
so it's a real fully off the grid situation. I have a little bit of a creek that I have to cross to get to my land, and we built a little bit of a bridge there last year to get us across. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on the road, so I've been using some of my old sapper skills to build what I call an improvised corduroy / swamp mat. And that allows me to get across with my ATV to where my cabin is. And so I'm using a lot of old tricks that I learned as a sapper to get by in the bush with the materials you have on hand and get it done.
So the old sapper skills, is it stacking bodies or like using materials from the woods?
Maybe
Using
both.
materials for the woods to assist you in stacking bodies, perhaps?
Okay.
allegedly, again.
Allegedly.
So,
Internet.
So,
Internet.
for those who are listening in for the internet and all that, a sapper is what a trained combat engineer is called once they graduate their basic trade qualification courses, and so we are called a sapper at that point. And sappers back in the day, we used to, and you can see I've kind of taken on the role here. We used to be the folks who would dig underneath a castle wall so that they could go and put in the powder and dynamite, or well, dynamite wasn't around back then, but they would blow the powder and then that would undermine the wall, right? And the wall would crumble and then the ground forces could penetrate the castle and start doing their thing. So that's where the trade came from. But in Her Majesty's, and it was Her Majesty's at the time. Now it's called His Majesty's Royal Canadian Armed Forces. But at that time, when I was a combat engineer, we were considered like the MacGyvers of the army. So wherever the infantry would get deployed, you would typically have a sapper or two along with their platoon. Definitely a few sappers with their company. At least one sapper per platoon when they're deploying, you would think, because when they get a mine strike or something like that, booby traps, that was kind of our specialty. Now, I don't know how things work in the theater today, how they're deployed, how they work. I got trained up. I was a reservist. I got injured before deployment, so that kind of stopped my career right there, and that was the end of that. So I got to practice.
It also
and play.
depends. It also depends what movie you watch. Because that's, unless you've been in that field like you have, right? Like a lot of people have misconceptions about, some people will relate a sapper to like, oh, that's the Vietnam War, or that's North Korea, like, because they were called sapper, like, so yeah, but yeah, I just threw a little funny jab, but yeah, it's nice to hear about how the Canadian military and different detachments maybe coexist, or how they train, or certain criterias, or everything. So also, I'm assuming your cabin is upwind from where you're stacking the bodies and using natural resources to build that road, because nobody wants to smell that.
Allegedly, theoretically.
My friend
Theoretically.
My friend who taught me to hunt and fish also taught me to watch my wind all the time. I got taught his way of hunting, which is to stalk. So I'm still learning what he would call white man's way of hunting, which is stand hunting or truck hunting. which is what he would call it. And he would admit to me that that's how most of his brothers and sisters would hunt nowadays. They were truck hunters or stand hunters. He was a stalker, and so he taught me to always watch my wind. And that's great when you've got a solid wind direction to work with. But I've now hunted in certain places where you put out your finger and that wind is shifting every 2 minutes. You're like, is that on this side of my finger? Hold on a second. Is that on that side? And then you start pulling out your stupid little powder throwing gadget to see if your wind direction is right. And 30 seconds ago, it blows that way. 40 seconds later, over there. You cannot count on the wind in certain places.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned about the wind. So you can't always rely on it. So I've learned up there, if you think you know one way to do something, that's really good. Learn 3 or 4 more ways to do the same
yeah.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
2 is
'Cause
1,
you
1
might-
is none.
Yes, you might have to change tactics. Equipment might fail. Circumstances may be wrong. I see all these wonderful, beautiful people on YouTube, for example, show you how to make a fire in the pouring rain. Have you seen how many actually succeed in doing a great job on the first shot? So I got to tell you a little story about my
Depends.
mentor.
We don't get access to those videos.
Oh no!
It took them 2 days, but they only show the snippet of. They're like, see, it works. Right?
Oh yes, that's the value of editing, isn't it? Well, I asked my mentor one day because it was really cold and we were out ice fishing, and he said, we need to go warm up. We're going to go over there by the shoreline, and we're going to start a fire. So I start on my own. I don't need to be told how to find dry wood, guys. So if I go find my dry wood, I start stacking it, and he goes, step back. I was starting to pull out matches and some tinder and stuff. He's like, step back. I'm like, oh, I got this. And he's like, no, step back. I step back a little bit. He comes up with his little jerry can that he had on his snowmobile, pours a little few droplets. Woof. He's like, save your time, save your energy, save your sweat. Your sweat is precious. Your time and your energy are precious in the bush. You don't have 10 minutes to fuck around building a fire. Just use the fuel, he said.
If you know how to use that skill when those resources aren't around, but at the same time, pour 10 liters of gas on it, walk away 50 yards, and shoot a flare gun at it is way better than standing there for 4 hours, right? Rubbing
That's kind of two extremes.
Well, when we wore
Have you
green,
done it, though?
we had a term for that. It was called overkill.
Yeah.
We had a term for that. It was called overkill. And there were times where it was appropriate. And there are times where it's just a little
fun because you have
yeah.
the expendency of those resources and you don't have to worry about it. We're just like, you want to have a little bit of fun, right? But like, that's a good point, right? Like everybody wants to learn how to do everything. But I'm like, if the resources are there to like not spend 20 minutes trying to get ambers to make a fire, utilize them. Know how to do it,
Right.
but realize that I'm like, I don't need to use those skills. I don't need to use the extra energy. I don't need to do, 6 other things where I'm like, nah, I can pour gas on it and take my butane lighter and go, and it's lit. But knowing how to do it, if you don't have the gas and you don't have your butane lighter, are good things to know. But understanding that concept of like, why get drained? Even though you're only there for a day, 2 days, why get extra exhausted about all these things to be like, I built a fire without anything, but I also needed 2 days to recuperate from it.
Yeah.
Everybody cuts out that last part where you need 2 days to recuperate of all the energy you lost. But if you pour gas on it, shoot it with a flare gun 50 yards, that's something you're going to get free drinks at a bar for a long time. So like, be smart about everything.
Just remember, video or it didn't happen, man.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So let me get
Put
this
it on
right.
Facebook.
If we're in a shit at the fan situation, if I pour
got a
10
flare gun.
liters, if I pour 10 liters of gas on the fire, go back 50 feet, shoot a flare at it, I get
Yards.
drinks for the night.
Yards.
50 yards. Okay, yards. Yeah. Okay.
We're talking way different feetage here.
Okay. We are. Yeah. But I was
Now-
focused on the free drinks for the night. Why did nobody tell me about this in an emergency situation? I had no idea.
If you go 50 feet, you may not participate in the drinking part. Hence why I said 50
or
yards.
you've already participated in the drinking part.
Free
I
drink,
must
free
see
drink.
video.
Potato.
However, if you're trying to be the I'm not here, I don't want anybody to see me kind of thing, that's not going to work either, because
No.
guaranteed somebody within 10 kilometers is going to see your fire. And there's nothing
Not
wrong
wrong.
with that, by the way.
No.
Well, no, there isn't. There are times where it's absolutely appropriate.
Yeah, when you run
I-
out of supplies, you let them come up so you can knock them out and steal their supplies.
I have to remember when I need to be seen to be extra seen, because for some reason, even though I'm 6'2", I tend to sneak up on people in the bush without trying. I'm naturally quiet moving around in the bush, so I kind of have to advertise, hey, I am here. Do not shoot at me. Here I am.
You're the opposite of a bear. People announce so that they
Well-
don't get attacked by a bear. You announce so that you're going to get attacked like you're a bear.
After a few months in the bush without a shower, one might argue that I might maybe smell like a bear. I don't know. I'll tell you if I run into the bear and if they run away. No, I've learned to, because I don't have a running water setup up there yet. I've learned to do what I used to do back when I wore green, and I do a lot of sponge bathing, which happens to also save your water. So there's a lot of techniques, again, that I learned when I was just a young fella in green doing, some crazy stuff out there in the bush, that I use every day, like watching how I dispose of things. We used to have to dispose of things in a way that they would not be seen. When I was a smoker, my cigarette butts always went in my pockets. It was out of habit because I was recce when I was in, and I really enjoyed that role, and I took it on, So all the little habits you do in recce, like doing a bounce test before you go out on a patrol. Well, you don't really go out on patrol. You go out on a recce. But you would do things like check your water bottle, is it making noise when you wiggle because you have air in the water bottle? Do you have kit on you that is rattling and making noise? Turns out all that stuff is awesome if you're hunting or if you're prowling around trying to not be seen and trying to get a sense of what wildlife you have around you. It's just useful skills that cross over. So I was relying on a lot of those, but there's a lot of stuff I learned that was totally new. I didn't know what frost does to things up there. That was a new thing for me. And those of you who have, been out there up north, maybe you can add comments and let us know what your big lessons were. But for me, it was what frost heave does to structures that you park on the ground or partially put into the ground. You must plan for frost heave, my friends. So now I'm...
So your tree stand sitting like this in the spring?
Well,
is not normal?
my cabin has a little bit of a tilt to it, and so I'm going to have to jack it up and even it out, and so I'm going to put it on some larger beams.
We can make that happen, buddy. Don't worry about that.
So
we're looking for
it's
nice vacation, so we can make that happen.
well. If you like a bush vacation, you should come up and visit. I'll put out the
Have you met
expedition
Mel?
tent for you. Yes.
We're in.
I had friends come up and visit, and they loved it because they got to have there is no amenities here for you. Oh, but if you need Wi-Fi, I can turn on the Starlink for you. Hold on. And they got to experience that feeling, which was really neat for them.
But
That was
also,
going to be one of my
how,
questions: was how many people have actually come up to visit you up there?
right? So how? But to add on to Brad's question of how many people have gone up, how many people have come in to just say hey, I went off grid for 2 days, but how many people have actually shown up and just been I need to figure this out more because this is more what I'm aligned with compared to just I'll take a few pictures and I'll post them on social media later, right? To just say I've done this thing and etch that box so they get more likes and more friends or whatever, right? There's a hard line there where I'm people benefit from being you don't have cell reception for 3 days. You don't have that flick of the switch. You've got light, you've got power, you've got this, you've got all these things where I'm like, some people are like, they can't handle it. They're like, if they've been 2 hours without a text message or a notification on Facebook, like they collapse. Where I'm like, other people may not know that like 2 days without all those things is beneficial to like just their mindset. Not even them, just like understanding the concept where it's just like, I feel better compared to 2 days ago when I had all these things, you know, so readily available and everything and whatever. So like, you know, so Brad's asking how many people came, and I'm asking how many people benefited from like being that hard disconnect for like a day or two.
So out of the group that we kind of bought together into this place, I had maybe 3 or 4 of them come up and visit this year. This was a hard year for a lot of people, I think, because of the cost of fuel and the cost of living having gone up. A lot of people I knew in the last year were a lot less mobile and had a lot less expendable income to spend the drive, because it is about a 7-hour drive from the Ottawa area, and another 3 hours north of North Bay. So you're talking about a healthy distance for most people, and it's also a commitment. It's if you come up for just a weekend and you leave on a Friday night, you will spend about 24 hours without driving, and then soon you got to start packing up to hit the road again wherever you're going, unless you happen to be less than 3 hours away, right? So the distance in its own respect has been a bit of a filter. Now, a lot of people say, "Ooh, that's you know, isolation," and yes, it was isolation, but it's also there's you know, a really good friend of mine who's now passed away. Bless her soul. I love the woman. I love the lady. She used to always say, when you talk about a crisis or something hard you're going through, she always said, "What's the gift? Where's the gift?" So in isolation.
That's
Yeah. In isolation, what I discovered was self-reliance. It was also this challenge, and here's the biggest challenge I would throw myself. Can I make do with everything I've got here on site without starting my truck today and going for a minimum half-hour drive to the closest small town where I will be overcharged for stuff, but just because it's traveled 7 hours from a distribution center?
Yep.
Right?
In an
And so that's
isolated area where it's not mass produced and not mass purchased, right? Like, so there's all these premiums you pay for where it's just like, is it worth that extra time? Like, I'm sure there are some times where it's just like, yeah, no, it's well worth, you know, taking that half-hour hike out, getting in your vehicle, going to buy a dozen eggs because it's like your chickens aren't producing, or you've got no protein. You've been out for fucking 2 weeks and you can't find a grouse. You can't find anything where you're just like, I'm sick of eating pine needles.
Right? And that's the reality when those of you who are out there prepping and living the prepper lifestyle. The last year I've relied a lot on my canned goods. And the things that helped me the most in those canned goods were the treats. And what I would mean by that is
Reese's
see,
peanut butter cups.
for me it was canned fruit. Because when I would go to the local stores, the fruit and the vegetable there, when you're used to growing up near a city or around a city, or even better near a farm area, and you've got farmers markets, you're used to seeing the freshest, highest quality vegetables and fruit, and everybody knows the benefit of those in your diet. Just for your mental health. So for those of you who are out there isolated, living on your own, do yourself a favor with your diets. Vary it intensely. Take vitamins just to boost your nutritional content when you're in isolation on canned goods. It will help your well-being in terms of how you're feeling emotionally, mentally, and your mental sharpness. So it was that I was seeking variety, but the preps helped me a lot. But the long and short of it is, no matter how much you have prepped, you will starve for variety. You will crave things that you don't have on hand just because you haven't had them. So I had the strangest cravings while I was out there for things I couldn't have.
Go
and they
on.
had to wait.
What are they?
Um,
You
the
can't
most-
leave it fucking.
Okay.
You can't leave it
okay.
like that.
Here's
What
a
are
really
they?
strange one.
Yeah.
Thai flavored style mango and mint salad.
That is
I
random.
will agree. That is the
Random.
weirdest fucking thing ever.
Really strange and
Never
random.
even had it.
Right? There was other times I had a craving for pizza. The strongest cravings for pizza.
Yeah.
And that's a normal one for a lot of people, I think. But
Yeah.
weird. There were days where I was craving vegetables. There were days where I was craving a particular flavor, a particular spice, just because I hadn't had it in years. So
Yep.
anything you can do to add some treats that you can foresee finding awesome in your preps, man, do it. So recently I went up there, I had some premium instant coffee. And for those of you who need your coffee every day, you know that there's a difference between
yeah.
good coffee
Mm-hmm.
and just it's a coffee. I vary my caffeine and my zap sources. I like chai tea these days. I was on a green tea kick for a long time, and I vary my preps of those.
Yep.
But recently, while I was up there the last week, I cracked open this high-end Colombian single origin instant coffee, and you know what? I
Instant.
felt like it. Yeah,
Wow.
instant, man.
Instant.
So,
Wow.
so you get your instant fix.
Nice.
You don't have to wait, and you get less dishes to wash when you are done.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
you don't have to worry. You don't even have to worry about taking care of your coffee grounds. Which I mean is not bad for a garden and all these things, right? Like, but
Correct.
but also talking December, where I'm like, there's no such thing as a garden. Where am I putting, 500 grams of coffee grounds for the next 4 months? Yes, it's beneficial to my garden in May,
Right.
April. Right? Like, you were
Yeah.
talking, your cabin was how big, right? Like, you can only
12 foot by
store-
16.
Right, you can only
12
store
by
so much,
16.
even if you go outside, right? Like you can only
That's right.
store so much coffee grounds before the raccoons start doing it, and
Right.
then you've got those weird raccoons that are like partying outside of your house because you haven't thrown grounds in like 2 days, right? Like, they're like, so it's, but everybody relates everything to like being out of power for 2 days, and it's like,
That's
okay,
right.
fine, yeah, you've got no power for 2 days, fine, like. If I drink instant coffee for too long, which this was proven, even Brad came up, went up to a buddy's property. He's got no power, outhouse, whole shebang. Went there for 4 or 5 days, gave him a hand doing this, doing that, like clear up some of the property. I get access to the property to hunt, so I was like, this is the bare minimum I can do. Is what do you need help with? My man hours are well worth the time. Where
Oh, yeah.
he hunts a week, I hunt a week, right? Or me and Mel go hunt a week. Like, well worth it, hands down. Brad wants to get into hunting. Brad's just like a weekend away from everything. So I'm like, we spent 4 days doing that. Like, what do you need done? What this, what that? And I'm like, we were drinking instant coffee. And I'm like, but I had a pounding headache. I'm like, I can't get away from this. Like,
Oh,
he's not far from like a little town. Everybody went in, and I was like, I just need time alone. We bought a percolator. Next day, problem solved.
Oh yeah, headache was gone.
Yeah,
Wow.
headache was gone from
The
having
world
instant
famous-
coffee from whatever, right? But these are things that I'm like, it's all good to have like instant coffee for like months on end. But if you get a headache after the second day of instant coffee because you've got no
You're
running
screwed.
water, no heat, no this, no that, right? Very limited on being able to make a regular fancy coffee, like you were saying, where you found whatever. I'm like, that is something you need to take into consideration. Don't get me wrong. I have instant coffee here, and I have done the Ranger coffee many times, as well as the Ranger cookie, which
it
that
works.
is fantastic.
Oh yeah,
Right?
it'll,
Like
it'll keep
hey,
you going, man.
that will keep you going. I'm not even
In a
gonna
pinch.
say it online. You got to figure out how to get in touch with me, and I'll tell you how to make a Ranger coffee.
If you come and
I
take the
know.
training,
I don't
I'll
think-
be offering down the road. I'll show you how to make a ranger cookie.
I
promise.
know Frugal
just
Gunny
gonna-
knows how to make this.
I'm just going to point out, you said we have to figure out how to get in touch with you. It's
Yes.
not hard when you put your email address under your name.
No.
Just saying.
Just to clarify, who reads most of those emails?
let's not.
I'm just saying.
We'll just leave that there.
Let's be clear. If it's circulating on the web, you don't really have a guarantee of anonymity and privacy, folks.
If you don't,
I like
if
to-
you're watching
So-
this,
Do I have an
There's no
episode
such-
for you?
exactly. That's what I was getting at.
I'll just tell
I'm scared
everybody:
for episode 2.
look up DARPA and the origins of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And ask yourselves simply this. It's just a question I ask. You don't have to have the answer. I certainly don't. Why would the largest Department of Defense in the entire world decide to open up a technology that was once only visible to themselves and their academically approved institutions and decide to open it to the public for consumption?
Do I have a podcast for you, buddy? It's just not.
It's just an interesting question to ask.
Yeah, 100%. But
So,
Has nothing to do with tracking people, I'm sure.
No, I don't know.
Oh, probably not. No, I'm sure it all has to do with watching kitten videos.
they have
Of
your
course.
best
course.
interest. They have your best interest and wholeheartedly love you 100%. Don't question it.
Yes, we
I've got
must
another
embrace
question.
the tech.
I've got
Yes,
another question for you.
beautiful.
If you could have better prepared for one thing before going up there, what would it have been?
That's an amazing question. The unexpected.
Well,
To
how the fuck
prepare
do you
for the
prefer
unexpected.
prepare for the unexpected? Like,
And
that's
I'll tell you
like
what
the
it was
worst
for me.
answer ever.
I'll tell you what it was for me in specific. What was unexpected for me is the amount of equipment failures I was dealt. So
Okay,
when every piece of equipment you have to move heavy things across mud and swampy soil and tough terrain, when it all fails and you're back down to moving on your feet through that slippery mud, everything is a struggle. So
Much more
just
appreciation for those things.
Oh, absolutely. If any of you out there are reliant on equipment of any kind, I saw that one of you is a small motor wizard. That kind of wizardry would have saved my neck. And here's the other thing. Something stupid like having a tiny space where you can't find anything led to me creating incidents that were just due to me not finding stuff. So, perfect example, I have two ATVs, and they're both wonderful ATVs for old kit. They are Big Bears, Yamaha Big Bears, direct drive, right? Renowned for their durability.
Yep.
So, I've got a 91, and my friend had restored it before selling it to me with the cabin. And I have an older 99. Well, the 91 was the only one I had on hand at the time, and guess what? I couldn't find the fucking key.
The
I was
fucking
going
key.
insane. I couldn't find the thing. I couldn't find it.
I'll
So I go online, how to hotwire a Big Bear, right? So I tried it. Guess what I did? I burnt my fingers first off, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
it tickled more than burned. Let's be
It
honest.
gave me it did give me a little bit of a tickle, and then the little light bulb on the dash went out, and I went, crap! I just killed my ATV. And I went a good 3 or 4 weeks without a means to get to and from where I park my truck and where my cabin is. So equipment failures. Equipment always fails, folks, when you need it.
Absolutely.
So I had to resort to a lot of backup ways to move stuff. Have you ever moved a poplar 2x6x12 for a distance of about 800 meters? I had to.
I could get it done.
It's doable by hand,
You didn't.
right?
You didn't stack enough bodies on the proper angle to make it slide.
You're absolutely right. With more bodies, I would have had much better drainage.
Hold on. You stacked the bodies too soon. They could have helped first.
That's another option.
Well, the corduroy road, I could have used the bodies in that way. And
Don't
anyway.
wear corduroy pants, buddy. It's weird.
Hey man, I still have those.
YouTube,
Yeah, I
it's been
know.
fun. It's been fun, YouTube. Yeah.
What,
Yeah,
corduroy?
we're-
This one's gonna
we're
get
done
us
now.
banned? Really?
Yep, that's gonna be the trigger, folks.
Yep.
That's,
Find us next week on
Cheers.
tour.
ah,
You can
really?
blame me.
That's the thing. That's got me mind boggled.
So
So
I can definitely understand that of
Yeah,
being
so
more
great
prepared for the
question.
unexpected.
Mhm.
But
yeah,
also-
2 is 1, 1 is none.
Yeah,
But
and
also relating.
and to Brad's point, don't expect that the backup techniques you have and have anticipated will work. For example, many times I used my trusty come along to try and do precision placement work. Don't do it, folks. Don't do it. Use something else. A come along is great for moving things across distance, but not with any kind of precision. There's too much spring in the cable, and it's going to do weird things for you if you're trying to do things like place a wall into position using a come along on its own. So little things like that, that you learn on the fly. You don't have a choice.
It'll get you within a feet of where you want it.
Exactly.
Right? But yeah.
Because when you're working alone, your helpers are your best friends, and often you have to build your helpers. So you build a structure with some wood to hold things while you work on the other side and the other end, and then you take that apart, and then you do the finishing, and things like that. But so adapting was the hardest, Brad, but it was the failure of equipment that slowed me down in my progress. Because the one thing you can't. Yeah, the one thing you can't fight is nature. She will beat you down to a pulp every time. And so I was rushing to try and prepare for Mother Nature hitting me with snow and getting my shed finished. But the ATV breaking down, I had a truck transmission sensor go funky on me too. And that sidelined my main vehicle for about 2 weeks. So that all compounded. So all I can say, folks, is be resilient, have backups, expect your backups to fail. So have 2 or 3, Clint Smith said it best. 1 is none, 2 is 1, and 3 is better. And if you could have a half dozen of those puppies on you, even better. He was right. Especially when you're in the harshest of circumstances, isolated, and you don't necessarily want to burn 10 liters of fuel just to go get a small item worth less than the fuel you're going to burn.
So one last question. You had
please.
said you relied a lot on your canned goods during the winter, during the last year. How many can openers did you have?
I had one on every single one of my pocket knives. I have one on my Leatherman. I have one on my Gerber multi-tool. And I have 2 or 3 in the cabin itself at all times.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So before we get hate mail, you said you installed a wood stove
Yes.
when you first got it. How many CO
How many?
detectors did you
Yeah,
have?
there it is.
And
I don't have one in there yet. I feel shame.
Wrong answer, buddy. We
No,
were gonna
that's
get lit up.
that's the right answer because now maybe Alan will come back.
Valid.
All
I
of a
didn't think
sudden.
about it that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tune in
There's a
next
lot of.
week to find a whole hate episode about that specific 30 cent.
Tune in next
second
week for
clip.
episode 199 where Alan loses his mind about CO detectors.
And just to add to the hate, I make my tea every morning with isobutane fuel. Yeah. Because you know
So
what?
episode 199 and 200 will be Alan going offline without carbon monoxide.
No, screw off at the 200. That's my challenge week, buddy.
Now, if it helps y'all, I do have to snowshoe about 800 meters just to get to my vehicle. So I'm certainly not lacking in cardio or oxygenation.
Trust me, Alan does not care about that.
No,
You'll hear next week.
He's
I'm looking forward
he's
to
already
it.
looking for your cabin to correct the CO issue.
I'm already subbed to you on YouTube and on Spotify now, so I can keep
Perfect.
tabs on what
Yeah.
you got, because I like what you're doing here.
Be,
I think it's
be
a cool
prepared
thing.
when you show up next to have your cabin full of CO detectors. He will find you. He will correct the issue.
I may or may not be able to engrave them. Just saying.
Oh,
But
we're gonna
yeah.
talk. I've got some ideas.
I'm
I'm re-entering. I'm re-entering the rimfire precision sports this year.
Buddy, we will talk afterwards.
Uh,
I don't want to get too many people emailing questions that I don't have answers for because I haven't played around enough with it or
Well,
had enough of my enjoyment with it.
how about this? I'll offer myself up as a proof of concept if you ever want to experiment. And if it's a
But
big
I allegedly have 50 things. I
50?
Can potential 15.
Oh, 15.
Yeah. Things
That's a
that
good
I
number.
can potentially
It is. Yeah.
depends what we're talking about. I haven't gone to the bathroom 15 times today. That would be bad.
Are you having your 8 liters of water a day, or was it 8 glasses?
Depends on the size of the glass. But yeah, we'll talk afterwards. But yeah, no, I completely forgot what my little side tangent thing was. So carry on as we were.
You were talking about the engraver.
Yeah, we're talking about
Yeah,
the
no,
engraver
but-
and the fact you don't want emails about it.
No,
That's right.
Previous to that, it was a whole other thing, and like, buddy, I'm lost, like 100%. I got
So
no clue what the fuck.
If anybody has any laser engraver questions, it's offthewallcustomizing@gmail.com.
Oh, fucker. Like,
And there you have it.
well, yeah, now we gotta hit the explicit button.
Yeah, we hit it
Yeah.
ages ago. We're well beyond
Yeah, I
having to
know
hit
we-
that button.
I know
we
we
hit
know
that
that.
in the we hit that in the pre-show chat.
So even before we went live, like, yeah, I'm gonna hit that
Now-
button.
We're just.
Now,
hitting
I have
the
a
button.
funny question. Do you get I see some of those content creators out there, they go ahead and they'll add duck sounds or whatever sounds to kind of cover up all the swears. Do you guys have
No.
to go through all that?
Fuck
No.
no,
No.
Oh, beautiful.
no.
I love it.
Or
Nope.
potentially this will turn into duck no. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, it depends on your autocorrect and what phone you're using.
Oh, yeah. That's a heinous thing, autocorrect. Oh.
Not once have I ever said ducking purposely.
A friend of mine called it auto wrong, and I think it's perfect. Call it auto
That is
wrong,
good.
my friends.
Well,
That is
I'm
good.
not talking about this live.
No.
That's all I'm saying.
I have a small project for you. You and I will talk.
I have a
offline.
fucking podcast for you. It's just not Sunday nights.
All right. Okay.
Sunday or Monday nights?
It's not Sundays.
It's Mondays. Okay.
It's Monday. All right.
That's beside the point.
You'll have to point me in the right direction, bud.
Oh, buddy, I will point you in many directions. But yes, they're all right.
Oh boy.
Oh, you're a fun bunch, man. We got to do this
Panel
again.
have any other questions?
So
Well,
I have a few things. Go ahead,
Please.
Jeff. I do. You already
No,
put them in
go
there.
ahead.
You
Go
obviously
ahead. I've been
get
trying all night. Go ahead, Peter.
No, it's good. I've accepted my place. Carry on, Jeff.
This is so polite, so
No, I
Canadian.
was kind of trying to bring us back to the actual topic and say, like, so what's the biggest challenge you ran into with your off grid, and what did you do to resolve it?
So remember I was telling about equipment failures?
Yep.
Yes.
Some equipment failures, you'll go online. Online won't help you. Right? Like the problem that I had. One of my ATVs was running very, very, very poorly. And you know what saved me, Jeff? It was my people networks. It was my people networks. A lot of the time when the internet couldn't help me really quickly, I started reaching out to my close friends and my trusted friends. And I started picking their brains. And more often than not, it was about topics where I was weak in. So one of you, again, is strong in small motors. I would have been able to use your help back in the fall when my perfectly running ATV all of a sudden went and decided to be an ass with me every time it got warm. And then a friend of mine, who was a very dear friend of mine up there, who was a former factory Yamaha mechanic, he kind of whispered in my ear one day and he went, "Psst, change your pilot jet." And so I went and did that, and you know what? Overnight, the fucking thing started working. Ah, victory! Right? But I had to ask the right guy. Do you know how many phone
yeah.
calls I made to different shops
Oh.
asking them what could be wrong with my bike? Do you know how many people said, "Oh, you just need a clean carburetor and a retune"? And the same thing kept on happening again. It took an old factory Yamaha mechanic to drop the line for me and let me know what was going on. So my knowledge where I was weakest was the small motors and the small engines and the mechanics. And sure enough, that's what got up there and bit me in the ass while I was up there. So to answer your question, Jeff, the biggest challenge was coping with crises that hit me in my weakness, where it came to knowledge and how to deal with it. So at least I had a plan B, which is crap. I'll take that phone call, how they do on those
Or having
stupid
legs.
game shows, right? Or having to
or
walk
having
and
legs where it's like, this sucks.
can't tell you, how many times I had to hump it the hard way, where I just resorted to, well, I got the hand tool and away I go. There were times when I dragged things using my sled across mud, because that was easier than trying to walk it, and balance it through mud and slippery puddles and this and that. So yeah, it's knowing how to cope with things that are outside of your wheelhouse and having plan B, C, D, and E. I had things that broke that I couldn't fix because I don't have a welder yet up there, and I don't have a means to power up a welder. So I had to rely on my people networks, and guess who ended up being able to fix and pull out the stud out of a broken stud out of an axle hub? It was an Amish fella who had taken up the art of welding. He happened to have the torches to heat up that hub and get that stud out. I couldn't. With all the means I had, there was no way for me to get that stud out. He did. So again, my people networks came through. So wherever you are weakest, whenever you're in a crisis, if you don't have the right resources to fix it or the knowledge, it's my people networks that have really pulled me through every time. So that's the one biggest challenge I face, and that's how I overcame it. And yeah, great
Living
question.
off grid sounds really shittier if I need that many people to have to interact with. Just saying.
You'll
Personal.
Only when you need them.
You'll need the specialists. So here's some of the things that I had to be my own in the last year. I had to be my own mechanic. I had to be my own heating and ventilation technician. I knew nothing about installing a chimney and a wood stove before this, folks. I had run a wood stove before, and I had been helped in installing one in my off-the-grid trailer long ago in Golden Lake. But installing it from scratch to do a proper professional installation, no. So I had to learn a new skill set. Building a full MPPT solar panel array by myself, nope, totally new, right? I had to go and learn it and look it up, do a lot of research. I had to be my own first aider. Oh yeah, I had to be my own structural engineer. I had to be my own carpenter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's just easy if you don't need an inspector. I fucking put an extra 2 screws in compared to what most people would say. Like, that's good enough, right? Like that might not be the best, but
No.
according to me, it's good.
Until it falls over on you.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
beside the point. I'll go after the inspector at that point.
I like
If it's
building
done,
things.
I'll fucking find with someone.
I like building things so they long stand way long after me. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just build them good enough, but I tend to overkill it a bit.
Never
That's
a bad
kind of
thing.
my
Not
philosophy.
I'm not opposed to it outlasting me. Just in most scenarios, I probably didn't do it right, but I'm like, it worked, right? Which is not wrong.
Hey man, some of the best temporary fixes stay permanent because they just work. And
Or you
to
get
that I
lazy to
say,
go back and you just get lazy to go back and actually figure it out.
yeah, my solar panel array, which you will see if you go and take a
Oh,
look
yeah.
at my videos, I didn't build that. That was a rack that somebody else left behind, and I thought, you know what, this fellow left,
That'll work.
a
Yeah.
good 50 linear feet of lumber here, and it's all in a structure that already has the shape I need. All I need
Yeah.
is to build a substructure to raise it, and I'll just reuse what he did.
Mhm.
So I saved effort, time, and it got up and running.
Upcycle.
Yeah, the thing when you're living on your own, other than challenges of things failing, is being most efficient with your time and your energy. A lot of times you're forced to do things the long way and the harder way just because you're off the grid and you're working with hand tools. Yeah, it would have been a lot faster if I had had a saw, a chop saw to take care of all of my lumber cutting. That would have been way, way faster if I ran the generator and ran the chop saw. I chose to do it all by hand and to nail everything by hand. Would have been faster with an air nailer, guaranteed, yes. Nobody's going to deny that. Would have been faster with a screw gun even, sure. Would it have been as solid though as using a good old Estwing hammer and 4-inch spikes? I don't know. Time will tell, right? But I did it that way because I saved a lot of hassle. When you're living off the grid and you have only a tiny little amount of storage space, just getting ready to do work means you've got to go through bins, toolboxes, and stuff to bring out all your fasteners, all of your tools, your square, your pencils, right, your measuring tape. And then next thing you know, oh, I forgot this. And so you're already running back and forth to go back and get the one thing you forgot, and you start your job. That's what takes the most time, is setting up when you're working by yourself. And if you don't keep good habits about yourself, like putting away your tools when you're done with them, that's going to come back and bite you in the ass so hard. Where's that
So there's,
measuring
like-
tape?
There's no Home Depot like 2 minutes away. Or Home Hardware, Lowe's, Rona.
No.
Like, right?
I'm- There's a hardware store about 24 minutes away. It's an Ace Hardware store. There is
And you're
a
lucky to
Castle
find
building.
a good measuring tape.
Well, bud, man. So you can, and on the topic of measuring tapes, you can go spend $13 at the local Castle Building Center for a made in a certain country measuring tape that will fail on you in 2 months flat worth of use. Or you can go and spend the $25 for that nice Milwaukee tape, which will only break in about a year. Which will cause you the most frustration while you're working over the course of the next year? Buying 2 or 3 of those cheap ones that break? Because you know what? When one of those things breaks on me, man, it goes flying at the highest speed and it becomes a projectile of death.
You had me at Milwaukee.
But I pull out that Milwaukee and it's going to take my abuse for the next year before it gives up the ghost, you know?
If not more, right?
If
Like,
not longer,
so-
right?
So is that something? Well, hold on. Let me see. Did everybody ask the questions? Because I didn't put any of my questions.
Yeah, that was a really
Go for
good
it.
question, Jeff, and I kind of went on a big tangent there.
No, but so that was the thing, right? Like, so, okay, so you turned into handyman, mechanic, your own engineer, a whole bunch of stuff. So, would any of the things that you potentially had, like, you've got your handy dandy, $20 kit that has a hammer and a whole bunch of stuff. So, is anything related to what you use being like, I should have potentially purchased something a little bit better, or I purchased something and I got no clue how to use it?
Wow, that's another awesome question, man.
Right? Like,
Um,
okay, so I went out and I'm like, I have a $60 budget and I want to maximize the tools I have, compared to me being like, I should prep better and, save $400 and buy, a bunch of tools, whether they're all hand tools, that doesn't matter what, was it better off to, figure out how to make your budget stretch more before taking this leap, compared to just being like, I'm gonna go to the dollar store because they got, screwdrivers, hand saws, vice grips, that, compared to if you would have doubled your budget and went to a different store and purchased maybe on certain aspects, something better that would have utilized better on your year compared to anything else.
That's a really, really good question, and I have an actually fairly good, clear answer to it. it's not always clear the level of investment you need to put into your prep tools and supporting tools and equipment. And you kind of have to base that on knowing yourself a little bit and how you do things. So I'm the kind of person that when something breaks, my first reaction isn't, oh man, I got to call the warranty guys. Most of the time it's
self-reception.
well, yeah, because of that very fact, I've gotten used to, well, I can probably do this myself. And unless I have zero clue whatsoever, odds are I'll try it myself. Now, if you're that kind of person, you owe it to yourself to have a certain level of quality of tools. So any of us who have used hand tools for a certain amount of time will know there's a sweet spot in price to pay. So let's talk about just something really basic that everybody will probably be able to relate to is a screwdriver. Okay. You can buy a screwdriver effectively that will probably put together that silly little $15 shelf that you bought at the same place at the Dollarama or the dollar store, wherever you bought the screwdriver, and you'll probably be able to put it together and it will probably stand by the time you're done. Now,
fingers crossed.
In a circumstance when you really rely on that tool, what's going to happen to it? The bit will chip because it is not a properly hardened steel. So right in the middle of the critical point of finishing that fastener off so it's proper and flush, and instead it's sitting proud and it's going to cause you injury or malfunction because it's going to catch into everything, or the part's going to be loose and not properly fastened in the first place, all because you cheapened out on your screwdriver, all on your wrench. That's a lesson I learned very young working on my own car. So I got used to, when I'm buying a tool, I'm not necessarily going to look at the very cheapest low end, again, depending on what I'm doing. And I'm not necessarily going to look at the very highest end, again, depending on what I'm doing. I happen to enjoy wiring. I'm a little sick in the mind like that. I'm a little weird, okay? I got into wiring by adding stereos to my cars as a young lad, okay?
There is nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with wiring.
In case you hadn't noticed, did you see Eric's background? That's his actual backyard.
Awesome, man after my own heart. I enjoy wiring work. It's a sick and twisted thing. It's a bit masochistic because it hurts your brain when you're looking at a pile of spaghetti and you're trying to decode it in your brain. Okay, what did I build here in the first place?
There's something peaceful about it.
Unless you have garlic bread and just scoop that in, buddy. Spaghetti.
But there is a Zen place I go to when I'm doing wiring. And so for me, I have no problems investing in crimping tools to do my own wiring work. I have no problems with that at all. I feel it's very much worth it. But let's say, for example, I need a sanding block. All right, a sanding block. When I was a young lad, do you know how you built a sand block? You took that little piece of scrap 2x4 that you had on the ground from your last cut. You'd wrap a piece of sandpaper around that. You'd squeeze real hard. You had yourself a sand block, right? So I'm like an odd mixture of get the right tool for the right job because it yields an immediate benefit. So don't cheapen out on wrenches, folks. Wrenches will leave you hanging with scraped knuckles, swearing, with bloody face at the worst time when you need it. A screwdriver that isn't appropriate to the task will strip, will break, will cause you to slip and maybe even puncture yourself with that screwdriver. Ask me how I know. So
how do you know?
How do I know? Yeah, I have so many scars on these hands.
Yeah, I've got a few scars on my hand from the same thing because of what I do for a living.
So you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's areas where you can cheapen out on a tool, and there's other areas where it's good to have a good quality one. So what I like to do in the philosophy of tools is if I just needed to get a project done, I may not get the highest end one if I know I'm not going to see 3 projects used with it. But if I do notice that I use it for 3 projects, the next time it fails, I'm buying the higher end one and I'll have that one. Or then I'll get a backup that's cheaper or slightly better. But that often helps me learn the right thing to get next time. You know what I mean?
And that's the funny thing. So when I did so I got into automotive, to mechanics. I've been doing that since I was. I did co-op in high school, so I wasn't even 18, right?
So last week, got it.
I'm. Wow. Jesus, seriously? So the guy I learned.
You left that one open. I had
Yeah,
to.
so the guy I learned 90% of everything I do with tools in my hand because I fix equipment for a living and this that. I learned from him, and his big thing was this guy spared no expense on anything that could potentially be required to do his job. Like he had tools like drawers full of stuff that I'm like everybody was too cheap to buy. He purchased he had, and he was like, if you ask me to borrow this twice, you need to buy your fucking own. No answer for once. He spared no expense. He bought top quality. I worked in a car dealership. It was Snap-on. It was Mac. Matco wasn't even around when I started, right? It was Snap-on, Mac. He preferred one brand over the other. Didn't matter. He's like, if you need to ask twice to borrow this tool, because I worked at a dealership, so I'm like, they had shop supplied tools, right? Like they had that $9,000 scanner that you plug the thing in and it tells you what wire to go check. Like all this stuff. They had lots of stuff, but he's like, all these tools I have in my toolbox. He was one of the only guys that had pretty much anything you can think of. He's like, if you ask me twice, buy your own. Don't ask me again. He didn't make a list, but he had a list up here. And like, there was nothing. Like, it was one of those things where that was one of the first things I learned. If you need to ask someone to borrow something to do your job, you either need to purchase this or go to Canadian Tire, Princess Auto, whatever the store is. You may not need to purchase, the $1,000 kit to do this, depending. But what I've done for the last 20 years, I don't know. I'm not doing math right now. But I'm like
2 weeks. I think we established 2 weeks.
No, that's when I'm getting married. That's different. Does that reset the clock?
It might. It might.
I'm not sure how that works. Let me know once you figure it out.
I don't
could
think
use
I'm
a few
ever going to
tips.
figure it out. But right,
use a
so
few
I'm like,
tips.
but there's a point where I'm like, I'm okay spending, $2 on this potential tool that I will use from time to time that I don't need, the $300 tool for it. But there are also certain points where I'm like, there's a hard break where I'm like, no, you need to buy quality over what the price is.
Yes.
Right.
When my philosophy is this, I'll scan the prices. When the extra jumping quality isn't more than a certain price bracket, and I reserve the right to determine what that bracket is at the time and place of the purchase.
Especially that scope on that 308.
Don't even get me started about optics, brother. Oh, yeah. Don't even get me going about optics. But example, socket set. A socket set, right? A silly little thing. Well, the very first socket set I purchased when I was 17 years old, guess what? I still own it. And it had a lifetime warranty on it. But after a lifetime or so of usage, is 25 years or more of usage start to count as lifetime? I don't know.
Yep.
That's a good question. Yeah? Okay.
Potato,
So after a
potato.
lifetime of using it, I've realized that I don't like the design on the direction changing flip it doodad thingy dingus. So
Is that
now
the official name of it?
I just dubbed it that.
You just have that hard transition of becoming an old man. That's that hard
he's
thing where
right,
it's
though.
like, get off
He's
my
right,
lap.
though.
Wow.
But you gotta check this though. I might be an old man, but I'm definitely not obsolete yet.
Keyword on being yet, but sure.
Oh, there's one day I will be obsolete. I'm starting to be.
We all are. We all are.
I was honestly sure that by now I wouldn't be needed as a computer tech, because that was my former craft, my
That's
former
why you went up
expertise.
north, right? So, like,
Yeah,
I've known you for 3-4 years off and on, have helped me out many times, sliding in rifles, learning this, learning that. The whole reloading process starting with you, where I've gone down way too many rabbit holes on that
Oh.
side, right? And
oh,
like we hadn't chatted for a little while, and it was that transition where you're talking about where you did your, year off grid, where I messaged you and I'm like, hey, we haven't chatted in a while. Like, hey, how's it going? Like, we're gonna come up and see you, and you're like, that's a long travel. I was like, buddy, Smith Falls is like an hour and a half, 2 hours from where I live. You're like, no, I'm up here now, and you send me a pin drop, and I'm like, that's fucking 8 hours away. And I'm like, I'm not opposed to driving 8 hours. Don't get me wrong, right? Like, you've
Road
helped.
trip.
We've had those little random chit chats. It all started by me walking in saying, I'm taking my lunch break, and I'm getting my firearms license real soon. And like, it was one of those weird rabbit holes where I'm like, I'm looking at this one. He was like, how much are you willing to spend? I was like, I'm not saying I have an actual budget. He's like, hold a Tika. And I'm like, now we own Tikas, right? Like,
Of course.
it was one of those,
course.
but like, very friendly guy, and like, it just progressed to like just me randomly in a gun store before I got my license. I'm like, fine, I can't hold it, but whatever. Where I'm like, we've communicated many times, we've helped each other for many things, and I'm like, it's nice to see that progress. But I'm like, I'm not saying I like interacting with people. That's beside the point. But but just seeing that, where I'm like, like, my biggest thing is like, you had a year's worth of supply of food. So is that just saying you had a year's worth of supplies of like chunky steak and potato soup?
No.
Or was it a variety of things, right? Because like,
huge variety. Yeah.
because depending who you talk to, was it all like Campbell soup, chunky soup, and like 9 different flavors for everything? Or was it bagged or canned rice? Like, we've all seen that canned rice where it's like a can of like condensed rice with like chicken flavor, the Chinese flavor, or like
That's
whatever flavors, add a cup of water and like fry it in a pan and it's good. But like, so what was that year's supply worth of food? Was it like the cheapest dollar store selection you can find, or was it a variety where it was like, you've got, okay, in the winter I like eating stew, in the summer I prefer eating this, like, what was that? Because like,
Awesome.
are we
Awesome
talking
question.
about someone? Are we talking about someone taking $100 at the dollar store, or someone taking $4,000 and buying a variety of stuff where they're going to be comfortable for potentially a year's worth of food?
So what I did over the last year, actually not really over the last year, was really more the 3 years leading up to the pandemic. I felt this urgency in my preps. So what I did is every month that I had a little bit of spare expendable income, I would go to the Costco or I would go to the Freshco. So the cheapest places to buy foods in bulk, in my opinion, when you're buying them retail, right? If you have access to a distributor level pricing scheme, man, jump on that. You're going to save a little bit. But in my case, I didn't want to spend a lot of time and energy. So it was more of I've got to go get some honey. So while I used to go get my honey at Costco mostly because it was the best price per kilo in the local area that I could find. So while I was there, I would look at the prices of dry goods because it happens to be that dry goods store a lot better than canned goods 100%. In sub-zero temperatures, folks. Right? So that's the biggest challenge. Everywhere else in the world, they can rely on having a stock of canned goods. But if I leave my cabin for a week in the right time of the winter time, everything in there will go down to -30 in the nick of time, and probably 3 days for the cabin to cool down to that. It takes more than 24 hours for my cabin to drop 10 degrees in sub 30 degree temperatures. It's well insulated, but still.
I was gonna say that's pretty nice, but yeah, but still,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a pain in the ass.
Well, it's
Watch the videos. You'll see it, buddy. It's a nice fucking place. Like,
It's,
me and Mel are
it's-
going to take a vacation up there real soon.
The
Whether he's there or
construction
not.
is oh well, you're welcome to come up. It's very solid. It's built with 2x6 walls, and it's insulated with Roxol R22. It's really warm. But the food preps, I wanted to make sure I focused on things that would preserve well under freezing. So I bought large bags of flour that I would leave in a bin, and I told myself I'll just leave it in the bin for now. And in a year, if I haven't consumed it all, then what I'll do is I'll repackage it in some Mylar bags that I have down here, start at my girlfriend's. And so a lot of the stuff I haven't opened yet. So I'm going to repackage it so it can store for a lot longer periods of time. So bags of flour, bags of oats. Folks, oats are a really great way to get carbs into you. And I know everybody loves proteins, but in sub-zero temperatures, when you've got to, put
You need
on
that
your
bump carbs.
Yeah,
Or where
you need the
carbs will give you
carbs.
that bump.
Because I'll tell you this, I ate a lot of proteins at first, and I lost all the body fat on me. It was terrible, man. I was skin and bones, but I was ripped. But I was skin and bones, and I froze very, very quickly out there when I would sit still. I had to always go, 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 go. And the only thing that will sustain your body and go, 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 go is good complex carbs. Oats were the best thing for me. They didn't slow me down. They didn't cause a major carb crash later in the day. So a lot of oats in my diet. You want to have some variety for fibers. So I would bring in dates. Dates happen to store for long periods of time that provide lots
Were
of
they
energy.
okay with that bridge across all the dead bodies to come up for a date?
Well, sometimes
Different
you lose
date,
your
my bad.
appetite with
Yeah,
the smells,
my bad.
but
Different date.
I was thinking it would beat me to
Different
it.
kind of date. My bad.
yeah. What else did I store? Different kinds of fats. So butter. Butter stores pretty well if you keep air away from it, especially if it's often going to freeze.
I've heard that you can can butter.
That I would like to try. Canning is something that I haven't developed in my skill set, but in my
So
network
you're
of
gonna
people.
have Jeff. You're gonna have Jeff up there pretty soon to teach you how to
Yeah.
can.
Are you a canner, Jeff?
No, don't give them your
Just-
property
just
location.
learning,
Trust
but
me.
Yes. What's that, Pierre?
Do we have
I
do-
said,
do
don't
we have
give them the
hunters in
property
it?
location. Yeah, but the hunting,
Hey,
right?
I
So-
got contacts, man. I'll figure it out sooner than later.
He's almost got his hand license. just
Well,
saying.
put it this way. My dad, when I moved up there, he said, "Hey, can you send me a pin of where you're at?" I said, "Yeah, I can send you an exact pin of exactly where my cabin is," and I did. And he responded back a few minutes later, says, "You really live in the middle of nowhere, don't you?"
But also, so I'll go on a last question. We'll chat
Yes.
when we have supper real soon. Only thing I would say, like, you were fairly prepared. All your stuff for cadets, which I loved just as much because I did the same thing. Everything you have practiced for years before going off grid. What is the one thing that you never expected to be like, this is something I should have learned, understood, have some kind of comprehension on anything before going off grid? Was it your I don't have a green thumb. Like, I don't think I could go off grid unless Mel comes with no ands if or buts, because, like, I could shoot
I'll
deer.
agree to that.
I can find anything and everything. I could probably eat a bunch of stuff in the woods, but, like, I can't grow a garden to save my life. Or I just lose really interest in it very quickly. So was it like your gardening skills that you were like, I wish I could learn more about learning pesticides, something that's going to kill something? Was it just something that you were like, I wish I understood how to turn a wrench more, or understand, like, whether you've got a 2-stroke motor or a 4-stroke motor, just understanding the basic concepts of that compared to, like, I turn the key and it starts, right? Like, what are the things that you wish you would have sort of learned a little bit more not master, but just understand the concept to be able to troubleshoot for yourself?
Again, a really, really good question. I would say two things. Two things principally. The first one is more knowledge of small mechanics.
Which would be the downfall for like 98% of people that want to go off grid. 100%.
Yes.
Like,
don't fear the carburetor. Master the carburetor.
Don't do it in the snow though, because it fucking sucks.
No, and to add to Pierre's advice here, it sucks working on a carb in the snow. It sucks even worse when it's your only way in and out. So have a backup. Remember what we said? 1 is none, 2 is none, 3 is better, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
Bingo. I had one dead ATV, which meant that now my other ATV, when it went down, guess what? I was down to nothing. Yep. So look after your machines, friends. Fix them. Stay on top of them, because if you delay, and what was delaying me was income. I didn't have much income the last year. I had none really. I was living off my preps. So the lack of income was a real throttle on my ability to do stuff, and so I had to be more self-reliant, and that's where my knowledge of small engine mechanics really, really got me and slowed me down and hurt me. The other one that I would have made a lot more progress in terms of my preps in the last year was the Green Thumb business, friends.
Oh, buddy, that's like I don't know why they call it the Green Thumb. Green seems like an easy color to get. Green Thumb is like the hardest thing to get. You have easier time putting your thumbs in other things compared to getting a Green Thumb, but that's for a different.
I'm sure, like anything, if I was to really focus. So I tend to do well at anything I really focus in on and decide I'm going to be excellent at this to the best of my ability. I'm going to master this to the best that I can. I usually do a half-ass job at it at least, if not decent. Man, the one thing that I haven't just been able to do all by myself like that is understanding of when is it time to plant? What do you have to know about soil? What do you have to know about the plant? What do you have to know about the food? There's so much I don't know that, I felt very overwhelmed.
So was that also a self-reliant on like the store around the corner, the nursery around the corner, saying like, put your plants in, buy this feed, this fertilizer, this, right? All the stuff that is readily available at the swipe of a card. To be like, you're going to have at least 20 tomatoes, in a few weeks, and not having that resource when you get up there and just realizing like, I don't know when the time to plant tomatoes or what I could utilize without going to the store and buying, 16 different fertilizers and 16 different fertilizers and produce and this, that, and spray. So like learning the things that I'm like, okay, well, what can I recycle? So if I eat eggs, I can throw my eggshells in there, your coffee, that all relates to living off grid. Like recycling, 6 things 20 times will save you a giant headache. So would that have been potentially something that could have helped out for that scenario?
You bet. I think had I not been dealing with, so my biggest wedge, my biggest slowdown, if you will, that which slowed me down the most was the lack of storage. Half of my equipment is still down here in Smiths Falls in storage, and that's because I don't have a storage up there on my land yet, because again, I have a tiny little tool shed and a tiny little cabin. So the logistics of being self-reliant is totally different in a off-the-grid scenario than when you're an in-town scenario where
all your resources are available.
Exactly.
It's easy to be prepped when you have this, like
it's all at your disposal, right?
Yeah.
Up there, many times I would call the closest 2 towns to me, which are Englehart and Kirkland Lake, and to say, no, we don't have that.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, like 80% of the time, that weird thing I'm looking for, they don't got. And so now I'm driving minimum 1 hour to go there. And so you mastered very quickly the art of locating who's got what I need. And very quickly when I got up there, I realized this is how it's going to be in terms of me learning what I need to grow things up here. And all the people who are successful at it in that area where I'm at are the Amish. So I've started to network a little bit with them, get to know them a bit. But the Amish aren't exactly people you walk into their house and sit down and have dinner and say, hey, teach me how you farm. No. In fact, they're kind of reserved. They kind of keep that under the vest a little bit more. And probably for good reason. I think they've had different attempts to squash their way of living over the years. And so they've had to kind of keep things a little more quiet. And so they have their own network of people, and they're good people.
Also, to their defense, have you met people recently?
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't blame them.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the first things I do when I chat with them is I just let them know that, and I saw one of the listeners said, you can't exactly just pick up the phone and call them. And that's so true. You have to stop and chat with them. And at least in the country and out in the rural northern areas, it's a fairly welcome thing for somebody to stop and say hello and say, oh, hey, how's it going? I'm new to the area. They won't look at you funny necessarily. Some of the locals in town who have their cliquish habits, and let's understand that every small town has their own little clique of people. And if you're a prepper, you may not fit in with those people because they might look at you as that weirdo who's, comes into town to buy the odd thing but doesn't talk to people because they're just doing their own thing.
So you just leave your tinfoil hat at home when you go in town.
Well, I'm probably like every other bushman when I go into town. I just don't care about any of those city things when I'm going into town. I'm just going to look for some bolts or, some mayonnaise, things that I can't make myself at home, right?
Bolts or mayonnaise?
Bolts, mayonnaise. I'm talking about some of the most common things I used to go to town for. Bolts, fasteners. When you've got access to a sawmill. Yeah, it's just the weird things you don't make yourself, right?
All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm
That's
part
because
French.
you don't have enough chickens.
I'm
'Cause
part
if you
French,
got
so
chickens-
mayonnaise is like a staple. You have to have it, like 2 or 3 different kinds of mustard.
Do you have any Great Poupon?
Not of that brand, but I do have 2 types of Dijon, yes.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, I mean, me, Mel, we have our daughter. Our ultimate dream is to be off-grid and self-sufficient. If there was one thing you could tell whether it be a single person, a person that is married with a significant other, or someone that is married, significant other, and kids, what would be the one thing you would recommend to be like, I would, 100% no answer for buts, recommend that you need to look into, or, learn more or be more comfortable with this specifically to make this happen, other than having property, the cabin, whether it be, you understand, it doesn't matter if you've got money to set up an off-grid cabin, put the solar panels in, dig your well, get whatever, right? Like just something completely opposite of what money could buy to get you set up off-grid, but something that could make you self-reliant long-term or a year, right? Like we have $60,000 that'll get me property, solar, and a well, or water out of whatever creek close by to my house. That's it. I got no money for the next 4 years being up there. What would be the one thing that you were like, you should really work on this to be at least self-reliant, where I'm like, you're not going to be completely screwed?
So that's
a very loaded question.
Good.
Yes.
It's a great question. And I would have a hard time answering it had I not seen other people making a go of living off the grid up there, self-reliant. Everybody has their view of what self-reliance looks like, right? Based on their niche skill sets. So the comms specialist is going to be like, hey, man, if I've got comms, I can get access to anything. And that's absolutely true. One of the reasons why I needed to have my Starlink up there is so that if I'm isolated, at least I'm not without information. If you are limited in resources, information is what allows you to do more with those resources. Information in the form of knowledge and wisdom and experience are what makes a difference when you're shorter resources. So there is never enough knowledge to help you. You will always be on a learning curve. But that being said, I don't want to skirt your question, Pierre, because it's a really solid one. If you want to be self-reliant, first you must have the spirit of self-reliance. And I think everybody who's here talking probably has it, or else we wouldn't be here talking. But after the means to actually carry out your self-reliance, so access to land where you can be self-reliant to within your definition, right? So for some people, being self-reliant means I've got a few chickens and some plants growing inside, and I've got my garden full. For some other people, self-reliance means I only want to leave the house and the property for things I can't make myself.
Well,
I'm trying to get to that degree of self-reliance.
Yeah.
Am I there? Oh my God, no. But the idea is that's the ideal benchmark I set for myself. And every time I step a little closer to that, I feel the happy feels. Now, I went into this knowing that, okay, my weakness is growing food. Crap, when you want to be self-reliant, not being able to grow food is kind of a big showstopper. However, that being said, we have lots of examples of people who have had to hunt and gather to survive, and they did it for generations. But eventually, to thrive beyond survival, they all need agricultural skill sets, don't they? So, if true self-reliance...
Vegetarian is just an old word for bad hunter.
And if I can jump on that one, okay? I talk about growing food because it's my particular weakness, okay? But let's talk about the realities.
Food. I can't grow food.
Well, let's talk about that reality, Pierre.
Yeah.
You do not find a lot of vegetarians where my cabin is at. And it's very simple, my friends.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
Growing season, man. You just got none up there. We
So
still had snow coming down in early
You've got
June.
a meat and potatoes kind of area, right?
Yeah.
Because the season's short. You can grow potatoes probably really good in that area because it's a short season. Throw some stuff in. Like, it's a meat, potatoes, those short season things. Like, you can't grow something that takes 6 months to grow or whatever. But I'm like, turnips, unfortunately, are really low or very quick growing thing.
You're lucky to have corn cobs that make the length of my hand up there.
Yeah. And
down here it's
kind of good.
Oh yeah, I imagine,
right.
The kinds that grow well up there would be different from what grows well down here.
Okay, so there's a whole other thing. So you can,
right?
Yeah, you read that, Eric. Even before.
Oh
that.
yeah,
I did.
Go Melissa.
I did.
Vodka makes friends, vodka is an excellent solvent for degreasing and doing all kinds of things in mechanics.
Fuck that. Worst comes to
firearms.
worst. Sell that shit and go buy your veggies at wherever you buy. Go to the
Okay,
farm boy
now-
at that point.
And now he's touching on the other survival strategy I had, and here it is.
Stealing
What are my
shit?
strengths? Well, maybe not, but what are my strengths? What can I do up there that a lot of the local people do not do? Yes, I can
You
roll
said
my own ammo.
earlier, you can sneak up behind people and not know they're there. You can take half their fucking shit.
That is a bit of
That's
a
not
bit of a skill
moral.
set. I must recognize. Maybe not moral,
not
but it's
moral.
a skill set.
But it's a skill.
So the two big ones for me were, how to grow your own food. That was probably my biggest weakness that I'm constantly aware of. So I'm always on the lookout for more info. But I knew going up there what that weakness was. So I went heavily prepped with dry goods and lots of canned goods. And I didn't finish about the canned goods that I do have. It's a mixture of things that I can eat because I do have some teeth issues in the recent past. So I can't eat a lot of the foods that I used to enjoy eating. They have to be soft things now. Yeah, it's a real bummer actually, but we'll get to that some other day. So my canned goods included things that were high in fiber, because reality of canned goods is you will get bunged up if you're eating a lot of them. So
But I ate IMPs for a week straight. I get you.
you know what I mean then, man. I've had IMPs 2
100%.
weeks, and man, we're gonna get booted soon if we keep on this talk. So I'm gonna go back to the foods I had.
We're not talking that. No. But
So,
I'm
Find
just
us next
saying,
week
I
on the
understand-
Darknet.
so
I'm
my
just saying, I understand what you mean. by
my dry goods had a
fiber
lot of
thing.
beans and chickpeas, but in my
It keep
fresh
you
canned
warm on cold
goods,
nights.
I had a lot of beans, a lot of soups, because when you're cold coming in from outside, a soup warms up faster than any other kind of food. And the other things I had in my canned goods were those fruits that just perk me up when I've had my meal and I need something sweet, but low on funds, so I didn't go to the store this week. I'm living off my preps again for the week. Sometimes I would do that for myself. If I was low on money that week or that month, okay, well, I'm going to live more off my preps. So I would always tell myself, what can I do to avoid going to the store again today? And then the next day I would repeat the exercise. I wouldn't try to set it for 1 week. That's too much to cope with. It's like trying
day
to
by
not... Yeah, it's like stopping smoking. I could only do it for 15 minutes at a time, Brad. 15 minutes is all I could do. So that's as strong as I would commit myself to being. If I could do 15 minutes without breaking down and going to buy a pack of cigarettes, good. And if I do break down, I'll go and buy it. And then 15 minutes would elapse, and it's like, oh, I made it through again. So that's how I did it for not spending. Can I get another week by without going to the store? Because every time you drive, you're spending fuel. And that got me used to being as self-reliant as I can. But the weakness is food. And I think that's where they're going to get most of us and lock us into an economy we don't agree to its terms, is they're going to get us with the food. So if you really want your independence and your self-reliance, I think it has to start at what you put in your body every day. But I'm still working on that, admittedly. I have a little bit more skill set on the hunter-gatherer side, but I've got raspberries up there. They're endemic to the place. They're everywhere. I've got rose hips, wild rose everywhere. So I can harvest rose hips and I'll get vitamin C all winter long with that source. So there's a lot of beautiful things
Mel
up there.
will be up there whether you're up there or not real soon after hearing this.
Oh man, I wish I had more help to gather all of the raspberries. Oh, and right behind my cabin.
Send a pin drop.
We already have the pin drop. Mel will be
Right,
there
right.
next week.
Okay, cool.
Right beside my cabin, leading to the pond about 75 to 100 yards behind my cabin, there's a little trail. And it is chock full of wild strawberries.
Oh,
And so for about 4 weeks of the year, roughly July, you've got the tiniest, most flavorful, most tastiest strawberries I've ever eaten in my life. Except they're small, they're tiny, you gotta bend right over, and when you're 6'2", man, that's a lot of work. So I'm gonna invite you all to
I
bring
have a
up your
daughter.
young
She's
ones.
only about 3.5 feet tall.
You're reading my mind, brother.
I have a daughter.
I promise the little ones the same thing I offer any little ones who pick fruit for us. Fill your gullet as long as you put some in the basket too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You haven't seen her in a little while, but like, yeah,
No.
she's not that tall, but yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so at that point, like, so jams and everything. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you've got jams, liquids, making salsas or whatever, you don't need a pressure can, or you can boil can or boil. However
Water
that
bath.
word.
Water bath. Yeah.
That's the one.
That's it. Yeah.
So does that include jams, this, that?
Yep.
As long as it's not like pretty much raw meat is the only thing you need to pressure can, right?
That's what I've been told, and that's what I understand.
That's how I
but-
understood from everybody.
But I've got a
That
lot
doesn't
to
mean I'm
learn
right.
in that regard. So
Yeah,
Jeff, you
I
wanna
can
chime
jump
on
in
that?
and say at least for sure jams and salsa you can water bath
okay,
because I've done it and I'm still alive.
good to
for
know.
now.
Because I make a mean salsa, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't
You know,
worry, just
The real
Mellow
challenge
range.
I'd like to take on up there is growing hot peppers, because I know it's not natural for a poor hot pepper to grow in.
put them in the
zone.
microwave before you eat them. They'll be warm.
Oh, boy.
So, if any of you have some expertise in growing peppers in a cold climate, the one thing I
Greenhouse.
miss while I'm up there is tasty, spicy foods that make me sweat from the insides.
We
So,
have a
yeah.
podcast about a few episodes ago.
All right, well, I'll be paying attention because, yeah, I do intend to build a greenhouse once I've got a shed finished. That's my current ongoing project to pick up again in spring. Wintertime, it's a little rough to carry a lot of materials in, so I've put a lot of construction projects on hold. Yeah, so
Um,
Fair enough.
really good questions, guys. These are great.
yeah,
Oh.
that's all I've got is just those like weird things. Like you've known me for a few years. I'm like you're going the off grid away from the peoples has been a giant like kind of chub of mine. And I'm like, but just you've done it for a year.
Mhm.
I know you know quite a bit more for me for many scenarios and everything, but just understand that concept of like this may be something, you said you don't have a green thumb, and it's just like I can't grow a tomato to save my life, and I'm like I like salsa, but I don't want to go buy food. So I'm like, that's a barrier. Everybody, at that point where it's just like, what's your comfort food? What's your regular thing that you're willing to at least say as it is now to be like, I could live off eating tacos, nachos, and like pulled pork. Okay, well, you need to figure out how to make all that for a year in this month period, right?
Yeah.
And if you can't, you need to understand the fact that do you do this? Do you do that? How do you grow whatever? How do you make extra income? Because living off grid, the hassles of getting to and from work for a minimum wage job is, pennies on the dollar of what you're actually going to take home, considering everything, right? All that stuff where I'm like, it's just something to hear, like someone that's like taking that plunge that everybody wishes they could take and nobody wants to take. To at least, say, hey, you did it for a year. You're not that far away from civilization. You're in it right now, not too far from us, thankfully, because we're gonna do
right.
supper. But
Very cool.
you've had that challenge, like not just the weekend. Like everybody
That's
can say, like, oh, I can live. I took 2 days away from technology. Like
Yep.
I can do the off-grid thing and an apocalypse thing. But like, you took a year of it, where I'm like, that's a steep learning curve compared to someone wanting to take like a few days away from like having no tickety talk, and like they took the
It is a
pictures, but like,
serious test.
but like they took pictures, but then uploaded everything 3 days later on their Instagram, their Facebook, their TikTok, and their
The humanity. It's 3 days old. That's not new at all.
yeah, exactly, right. So I'm like, you took that leap and said like, hey, I'm a fairly outdoor guy. I know a bunch of stuff. These are my downfalls, and like relating that info to everything or to everybody that like, that's one of my like diehard dreams. I want like 200 acres. I'll go wash dishes at Tim Hortons twice a week to pay for the land tax, and I'm gonna have chickens, this, that, everything, and like a 2-acre garden, and we're gonna sell everything that we don't use at the farmer's market or at the end of my property. And like I'm gonna hunt for my food. That's my ultimate dream. May never happen, but like this is the starting point. Understanding the simple concepts that you have taken into that 1-year challenge you did, where you didn't have the complication, or I shouldn't even say complication, but like no pets.
No pets.
No one else that's just like, well, I don't want to eat stew. I don't like the gravy flavor, and it's just like you did it for you. You took a year's worth of everything. You were like, I can survive on this. I can figure this out without someone else saying, "Oh, I don't want this," or "I liked the gravy for a week, but now I'm going vegan," right? Because somehow they got on the socialist medias, right? So now you got to figure out how do they eat, like, I don't know, pine trees, but without hurting the pine tree by ripping the things out, right? Like, so it's just nice to see, right? Like, someone who has been doing this and understood everything and has taken many of those challenges on way prior to going off grid and putting all those things into practice and coming back and just being like, hey, you know what? There's still a lot I need to learn, is hopefully an awakening for some people that think they can handle everything.
I hope so. It's a great point you're making, that a lot of people wouldn't be ready to take that plunge. And you brought up, having others who are depending on you, like children,
or not even
a
depending
spouse.
on you, but just different eating habits. Like I may be potential to live off Campbell's chunky soup for a year, but someone else is just like, I have one can and I'm like, I don't want to fucking touch it for a year. So that's a whole other food prep you need to worry about. Right?
One thing I can certify is that you'll never know if you're capable of doing it if you don't go out and try it. Now, if you don't want to have a miserable time of it, it's probably better to try it out in little chunks first. So, for example, I had an off the
little chunks. That's good.
So, I had an off the grid trailer, and one summer I took nothing but long weekends for vacation. So I didn't have a 1 week vacation the entire summer, but I had a 4-day weekend every weekend for 2 months straight that summer. Yep. And I got to do that and live off the grid, half of the week during the summertime. And so that kind of prepped me. And then I started going hunting in places where there was no power grid at all. So I'm used to going 24/7 without a convenient power source other than your vehicle, and you don't want to run that for nothing, right? So you can build up to taking that giant leap that I took. And before going up there to live full time, I went up there at first for 1 week, then it was 10 days, and it was 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden I was up there for 3 months. And so on and so forth. And then I realized that, I love being off the grid. And once you find your comfort level that works for you, it doesn't seem like as much work anymore. But what will happen is when you come visit your friends or family who do live fully on the grid, you will, every time you'll hit that switch or turn that tap water, you'll have a little chuckle inside and go like, huh, look at that, eh? Right, and that's what happens to me.
So you'll either have understand the concept of having to live off grid, or understanding the oh my god, me going to the bathroom and going to flush is just a whole new world for that person. Just being the reliance of that, go lean against a tree every time you have to go to the bathroom for 5 days. Yep. Compared to sitting in your bathroom that has heat, has a fan so that you don't smell it, and you don't smell yesterday's, right?
Or here's a better one. What to do with all of it?
From yesterday?
What to do when you've been up there for a week? Do you keep finding another tree, or do you run out of trees and you start tripping in it? How do you dispose of it? Do you put it into a pit? Do you burn it? Do you
put it in your watermelon garden? You put it in your watermelon garden and you sell the watermelons. Don't eat the watermelons, but sell the watermelons.
Oh my god!
If you can export them, even better, right?
This might be a good spot to jump in and
call it
maybe say we need a part 2.
Oh, that'd be fine with me, but it was a pleasure chatting with you all, man.
We're hitting the 2 hour and 15 mark, and I think we're almost at a record for episode length, which is fantastic. It is impressive. There's been a lot of really, really good information in this episode. I think absolutely we need an episode number 2.
Sounds
because
great to me.
you're
I love your
obvious-
questions, man. You're making me think about it, and that's good.
I've
Well,
been
it's awesome, and
drinking.
you're an
You should
awesome
see
wealth
me
of knowledge too. Someone that's
not.
lived the off-grid life for
Yeah.
a year
Yeah.
is just fantastic, because a lot of us
And-
just simply haven't done that. So we don't have the experience of going through this, living off of our preps, and saying, "I've been there, I've done it, I've learned these lessons." And the fact that you're willing to come out here and share that with us and the audience is just fantastic. It's a great insight into something that most of us have not gone through.
I
and
wanna
that
thank you.
heart of someone saying, "I'm going to take my family off grid," and their kids or significant others growing up in like the off grid, where I'm like, they don't understand the concept of like you turn a tap and water comes out because like,
Yep.
no, we need to go get the water or whatever. But like that hard disconnect between the like growing off grid and like saying, I think this would be best to try and everything is, yeah, fantastic.
It's awesome.
I got to visit a couple of off-grid homes way earlier in my journey, and that gave me, I guess, the vision that it's possible, but I hadn't yet defined it for myself. And I guess you could say I'm still defining it for myself, but it's been a really wonderful learning experience, and I would wish for anybody who wants to go that route to do it. Jump into it with both feet. Don't be afraid. The one thing that will kill you before you even lift a finger out there in the bush is being afraid. Don't be afraid.
Cougar. It's a different kind of cougar if you're in town.
And that's a really great comment down there. Stay safe and carry your weapon. I've always got something on me. Always.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Right.
But I've always got
It's
something
live,
on me.
It's recorded.
It's a useful tool when you're living in the bush. You're supposed to have tools with you, so it's expected. I go to town with knife and Gerber, my multi-tool on the side of my fully open, and nobody even bats an eyelash and says anything.
Always.
Yeah.
a
In
tool.
town here in the city, they look at me a bit more funny when I walk around with all of that on, but I've gotten so used to it, it's like wearing a watch.
Yep.
And it probably would be the same for anybody who gets into the habit. So it's the same for living off grid. You can turn it into a habit, and I would love to turn this into a habit and come back and tell you more about what I'm learning and as it goes on.
Absolutely. We would absolutely welcome you back anytime, whether
Hey.
we're talking about this stuff or we're talking about something else. You're welcome to come back and chat with us.
We're not doing
anytime.
this rechat on 200 though, because we might have something other planned.
This is true. Yes,
All
episode
right.
200 is coming up. We got something going on then. Welcome
You
to
got
come and join us for
199
200, of
or
course. Yep.
201.
I would love to. It's
Or-
been great hanging out with you.
Or join us on 200 as well. That's
I just might do that
Yep.
too. I'll probably be lurking around. You've opened the door now.
awesome.
You know
Yep.
how it is when you open the door.
You know how to
they're
get in now. Yep, we're not getting rid of you. Got it.
Right on.
When you open up the
Appreciate it
door,
so
the
much.
smell goes to everybody. Oh, that's a different kind of door.
That's a different door. Yeah.
That's right. And that's good with me.
All right.
Oh,
Shall
thanks,
we move
guys.
into the podcast challenge? So, podcast challenge for this episode is find a piece of equipment that you rely on, get a second one. Simple as that.
I would even go as far as learning how to troubleshoot the one.
Yeah. Perfect. Find
Not
a piece
even
of
just
equipment
getting a
you rely
second
on. If you
To
cannot
rely
get a
on this.
second one, or
Yeah.
even if you can, learn how to fix it as well.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
learn to troubleshoot. You may not be able, like, say your generator is your one thing, and you blow a cylinder. You may not be able to learn how to do an oil change, do your maintenance on it, instead of
basics.
buying a second one. Yeah, I would even extend that. Get a second one, or learn the basic, simple things where you can troubleshoot before using your secondary for something so simple that you bring it to someone and they're like, "Oh, you didn't turn gas on something," and you're like, "Son of a," right?
Fair enough.
Let's hear it for the backups. Absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
Do both.
Upcoming,
Do both.
upcoming events. We've still got the annual Preppers Meet coming up in Desborough, Ontario, July 6th to the 9th. They have put a call out for volunteers. So I have put in the live chat link for that. So they're looking for some folks to put in some time and help them out with some things. So if you're interested in lending a hand, check out the link. And even if you're not able to volunteer, if you just want to come out and check out the event, it is a fantastic event. Definitely worth the trip out and go learn some new skills, because you'll definitely have some available to you there.
If I
And
lived
hopefully
closer, I
it'll
would
help
volunteer.
off-grid. Awesome. Jeff, you got a weather blurb?
Yeah, I'll try and be quick. We're gone a long ways here. So
We're
if you're
gonna beat a
anywhere in
record, I
the
think.
eastern U.S., if you're anywhere in the eastern U.S., be on the lookout for a nor'easter coming up in the next few days. Chances are getting more and more higher it's going to happen. So we're talking like southern New York State, New York City, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, all those places. You're going to get it. It could potentially in some spots reach blizzard criteria. Impact on the Maritimes is still to be determined. I'll update the Discord when I get more information. At the same time, there's another atmospheric river heading for California, dumping more rain, more snow in the higher elevations. While it's great for the drought and basically all of California, there are no more exceptional or extreme drought statuses in the state of California. So, while that's great for them, of course, the flooding isn't, but sometimes you got to take the good with the bad. They had to open the spillway and drain water from Lake Orville Dam for the first time since 2019. Just to give everybody an idea of trying to grasp the concept of how much rain they've really had. Think about a lake and how much water it's going to take to raise a lake 1, 2, 3 feet. December 31st, Lake Orville was at 700 feet. It's presently at 840. So
that's a lot.
Yeah, so you're talking about 140 feet of water in less than 3 months. So they've had. I mean, they needed it desperately, but like I say, sometimes there's too much of a good thing. But I think it'll do them well for in the future. And obviously, none of that water is counting all of the snow that still needs to melt. And there's 30, 40 feet of that in spots that needs to melt. So anyways, that's it.
Thanks. All right. Well, with that, I'll bring episode number 198 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or of course your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Take a second to submit a review, not a 1-star. It does help other people find us. And if you're in the pre chat, everybody gets that.
And we do record these shows live on Facebook, although maybe we shouldn't anymore do it live. Maybe we should put a delay in there.
No, live is way better.
Yeah. If you want an early peek at the shows, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast. Click the notifications tab. This gives you an alert when we're going live. If anybody wants to reach me, I'm at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, or I'm frequently on our Discord.
If anybody wants to reach out, I'm at batbradcpp@gmail.com.
You can potentially reach me, probably my significant other, Mel, off the wall customizing at Gmail or all the socialist medias. If you want me on Discord, because technically I'm signed up to it, but I don't check it, send me a personal message, or you can find me Monday nights where I end up a little bit more spicy on my critiquing of the government.
Oh, I don't know if it could have got more spicy, Pierre.
It got a little spicy tonight.
Do I have a few episodes you may not have listened to, because I have gone on some side tangents on that one. But yeah, and keep an eye on the socialist medias for Off the Wall Customizing. We potentially have a brand new machine that you probably can't see or understand, but few people have seen some of the products that may come out of it. And
The
I am having a fucking blast with it. It is awesome. There's a bunch of new shit that can come out of it. So
fantastic.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, it's cool.
All right, Frugal Gunny, where can everybody find you?
Well, again, another good question. I've recently waded my toes into the cesspool of social media, so you will find
hear
me
that.
on Facebook. I've even posted a link to my newest video on there. I don't have any friends yet, so feel welcome to friend me. I don't care to see anybody from countries who are trying to scam me, so, get away.
Fair enough.
But, they'll all come no matter what. I'm also, of course, on the YouTube, so I'm on the Facebook, I'm on the Gram. That's what I got for now, and it's Frugal Gunny across the board on all of them.
Awesome. I put a link in the live chat for those of you that are watching, so you can follow
Thank you.
through there and definitely check out his videos.
Much
For me, you
appreciated.
can check out rapidsurvival.com and get me there on the live chat. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. So thanks for joining us for this episode. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe.
And keep learning.